All right, everyone, good afternoon. I think we'll go ahead and get started. It's 1:30 or maybe a minute after. So just to keep the time going and make sure we do what we set to accomplish here. My name is Greg Easley. I manage the Water Quality Assessment section of the TCQ Water Quality Division, and I'll kind of be your moderator for this afternoon's meeting. So just want to welcome you all. Thank you for coming, and thank you to those who are participating or watching on our live stream as well. As mentioned in some of the meeting announcement materials that hopefully you received, the purpose of this meeting is to kind of serve as a follow-up to the Pristine Streams rule petition that was put before the commission several months back earlier this year. We wanted to kind of continue the dialogue on this topic of wastewater permitting and nutrient-sensitive streams. So what we intend to do today is provide a little information from our staff, from our perspective on the permitting process, and then after that, we want to devote kind of the majority of our time this afternoon to y'all to hear from stakeholders, hear your comments, recommendations, suggestions, and feedback in general. So, while no decisions are going to be made today, here in this room, we do, commit to hear what you have to say. I know we've already received information and materials from some of you already that we do have and are looking at, and any other information you provide today, we'll certainly evaluate, consider, and potentially formulate recommendations that we can put before our executive management going forward. So again, that's kind of the overall purpose of the meeting. I guess the structure of the meeting, like I said, we'll initially have, as it's pointed out in your meeting agenda, we'll have several presentations from our staff members, including myself. And I'll introduce these folks up here in just a little bit. And then we'll get to the public participation section of the meeting, and that's, again, when we want to devote most of our time to that. Back to the presentations, though, as we do each presentation, at the end of them, you certainly are welcome to ask any questions about the material that you were presented. And we'll try to answer those, on the fly. But we would ask that, any other, larger comments or recommendations, that we kind of reserve those until the public participation portion of the meeting. That would just kind of help things go a little more efficiently. We will also have a questions and answers portion within the public participation section as well, that, anything you forgot or think of later, you can ask us then, including those who are watching online. You can send in questions to our stakeholder email box, which is wq-streams@tcq.texas.gov, and we'll answer those questions as you send them in. We're allotting 3 hours to this afternoon's meeting, so if we're getting closer to 4:30 and we've still got people wanting to talk, we'll do our best to try to get everyone in and wrapped up by 4:30. And on that note, we'll probably, depending on how many people do want to speak, we may have to limit each person's time to somewhere between 2 to 5 minutes, whatever the total number might be, and do the math and make sure everyone gets their chance to speak. And I think it was also in the meeting announcements that, if you're part of a group or an organization, we would ask you to limit your comments to just 2 individuals, again, just to try to reserve enough time for everyone to speak. And if it turns out, we have more than enough time, then we can certainly take additional comments as necessary. Just a few guidelines to mention. I think I already mentioned the group and organizational one, and the potential time limits. I guess for those who are watching online on our webcast, We can take comments from y'all as well. Send in any comments you may have to that same email box, wq-stream@tcq.texas.gov, and we'll certainly receive those and take those into consideration with all the other comments we get today. And then just a couple housekeeping items before we kind of get into the substance of the meeting today. It is a 3-hour-long meeting, so if the need arises, you need to go to a bathroom, they're just outside the door here in the hall, but we would ask if you do need to exit the room, if you could go through the rear doors there, just as, it's just a little less distracting for everyone. And if you haven't done so already, we would encourage you to register your attendance with us. Probably most of you here in person have did that at the desk outside the door, but for those online, if you haven't done so, you can also use that same email address that I just gave to register your attendance if you desire, as well as to join the stakeholder group and get on that email list. And I guess just lastly, the meeting, the webcast is being recorded, so if anyone wants to go back and listen to anything, you certainly can do that. It'll be posted on our YouTube channel, the TCQ YouTube channel, and you can watch it again or parts of it as you need. So with that, let me introduce the rest of my staff. Again, my name is Greg Easley in the Water Quality Division, and let's, I guess, start over here with Peter, and then we'll go around this way. So remember, you need to turn on your mics when you...
Oh. You were introducing me.
Oh, no.
Thanks. I'm Peter Schaefer, team leader of the Standards Implementation Team here at TCEQ.
Good afternoon. I'm Baltasar Lucero Ramirez. I work as part of the Wastewater Plans and Specs Review Team.
I am Louis Heron. I'm part of the Plan and Spec Review Team.
Firoj Bahora. I'm the team leader for Municipal Permitting Team.
Good afternoon. I'm Anthony Tatu with the Environmental Law Division.
All right, thank you all. So with that, I'm going to just go ahead and start into the first presentation regarding pristine, nutrient-sensitive streams. Some of this will just kind of be recap of some of the information that you may or may not have seen or heard of in the rule petition, the Pristine Streams Rule Petition. But as you probably know, there was a set of water bodies, segments of rivers, what we call classified segments, that were identified in this rule petition, Pristine Streams Rule Petition, which included 22 river segments and their watersheds. And then I guess the idea being that these water bodies and their watersheds would be close to any new or expanded discharge, wastewater discharges, domestic wastewater discharges, that is, in those areas. And so, part of what I want to do here is just kind of review those water bodies, their characteristics, what sets them apart, and then talk a little bit about some of the permitting that has gone on in those watersheds. So I guess, what sets them apart, really, it comes down to, at least for the purposes of the rule petition, it was the data that was collected and the essentially the low phosphorus levels that these streams exhibited based on monitoring data that our agency collects and compiles. And so specifically, the criterion is, at least 90% of all the total phosphorus data collected in these streams would fall below our reporting level of 0.06 milligrams per liter. But essentially, though, the reason that these streams exhibit those kind of levels is that they're clear, rocky bottom streams, low nutrient ambient conditions, and so all that adds up to them being sensitive to any nutritive any nutrient inputs that they receive. So, so as I go through these following slides, we'll just touch on kind of some of the uses of these streams, where they're located, and you know, again, some of the permits or permitting that's gone on in those watersheds. So this was a table that was, hopefully you saw in the meeting announcement materials. This is the same table on the screen here. I won't read through the whole thing, but these are the segments, the 22 that I'm referring to that were in the petition that met that data quality criterion. And so we'll just hop through each one separately, and I guess here's a map, kind of a zoomed in map of where these segments are, and I did fail to mention, it looks like y'all caught on that a lot of what I'm going over here is in your handouts, or the handouts that are available out at the table outside the door. So you're always welcome to review those as well as I go through them. But generally speaking, you know, most of these segments fall in the west, or the west central area of Texas. You know, a lot of what we refer to as hill country area. Some other segments like, especially the one in the Panhandle, the North Fork of the Red River, fell into that category as well. But that's just kind of a little inset on the map there. And speaking of that segment, just showing you the watershed of the North Fork, Red River, east of Amarillo, again, up in the Panhandle. I believe there's, I'm sorry, it's a little hard to read. Let me get some notes so I can read a little better here real quick. I believe there was several permits in that watershed, and I apologize, I thought I could read this screen, but I guess getting too old, eyesight's not as good as it was. So yeah, four permits in that watershed, existing permits that have already been issued. And 3 of those are what we call TLAP permits, or land application permits. I'm sure you're familiar with that terminology. No discharge, in other words, and then 1 City of LaForce that is a discharge permit in that watershed. The other things to point out here, though, are, you know, as far as how these or this particular segment at least is designated in our water quality standards, it does have a high aquatic life use, and this segment and you know, all the others that I'm going to talk about have other uses designated in criteria, but we'll just focus on a couple of those. Like, you know, all of them will have contact recreation use and things of that sort, so don't necessarily need to point that out. Oh, I'm sorry, I was looking at the paper, wasn't showing you it on the slide, so that's what I was just talking about, that table that's in your handout. On our next group of segments, this is an area is actually just north of here, north of Austin. It's the only 2 segments from the Brazos River Basin, the north and south fork of the San Gabriel River. And it may be hard to see, but hopefully you can point them, you can see them in your handouts as far as where the actual locations of these permits are that I'm going to talk about. But these 2 segments have a high aquatic life use as well. They have another use that we call aquifer protection use, and that's because portions of these watersheds overlie the Edwards Aquifer, either the contributing or recharge zone or other zones of the aquifer. And I guess here in these segments, each one has 2 permits. The South Fork has 1 discharge and 1 no discharge permit, and the North Fork has the same thing, a discharge and a no discharge permit currently within that watershed. Moving over to the Colorado River Basin, again, pretty close to where we are today. We've got segments 1427 and 1430. In other words, Barton Creek watershed and the Onion Creek watershed. Again, these also have aquifer protection use, and you'll notice the green and the different pink, purple shadings there indicate aquifer, Edwards aquifer zones that are the reason for the aquifer protection use. The aquatic life use designations for these two segments is high aquatic life use as well. And one thing of note in Onion Creek, that watershed is subject to the Colorado River watershed rules in Chapter 311 of our administrative code, which basically prescribes certain requirements for permits, for discharges within that watershed. And in this case, for Onion Creek, we have 2 discharge permits and quite a few, I believe 11 TLAP or no discharge permits in that watershed. Barton Creek does not have any discharge permits that have been issued in that watershed, and all 14 permits within there are TLAP. And obvious reason for the higher number of permits is because it's so close to to Austin. It's a populated area, and so that's the primary method of wastewater management in those areas. Moving on to the Guadalupe River Basin. We have several segments here grouped together on one slide, one picture. The upper and lower Blanco River, as well as Onion Creek. I'm sorry, Onion Creek's at the top. We just talked about that. Cypress Creek, sorry, that are in this grouping. Skipping to the table here, the aquatic life uses are high again, except for actually the upper Blanco River has an exceptional aquatic life use, which is the highest designation in our water quality standards for aquatic life use. And all 3 of these also have aquifer protection use. As you see, at least portions of these watersheds do overlie the aquifer contributing and recharge zones. As far as permits go, the lower Blanco River watershed does not have any permits within it. The upper Blanco has 4, 3 discharge and 1 no discharge, and Cypress Creek just has 1 no discharge permit currently within that watershed. Also in the Colorado River Basin, the Llano River segment 1415 watersheds shown here. In location of 3 different permits there on the map, essentially associated with several cities in the watershed. Excuse me. The aquatic life use of that segment is high aquatic life use, and the 4 permits, I may have said 3 earlier, there's actually 4 permits in that watershed are all discharge permits. And I apologize too, I meant to also mention that last column there, or point out the fact that whether or not those existing permits have any nutrient limits currently in their permit, and primarily talking about phosphorus or total phosphorus. And only a couple of those permits have requirements for phosphorus. City of Junctions is a monitoring and reporting requirement. It's not a numeric limit for their discharge, and the City of Llano does have a numeric limit in their permit. Jumping back over to the Guadalupe Basin, talk about the north and south fork of the Guadalupe River, segments 18, 16, and 17. I'm sorry, 17 and 18, and segment 1818, which is, I'm sorry, I had it right the first time. 1816 is Johnson Creek. Sorry, I'm getting mixed up. In this group of segments, in Johnson Creek, no permits there. Same with the South Fork Guadalupe River, no existing permits, wastewater permits. in that watershed. On the North Fork, we have three, and all three are TLAP or no discharge permits. Segment 1905, Medina River above Medina Lake, which is in the San Antonio River Basin. That watershed contains 3 permits, 2 no discharge, 1 discharge. The discharge permit does not have any, the city of Bandera does not have any total phosphorus limits or requirements in its permit currently. That segment does have an exceptional aquatic life use in our water quality standards. Over to the Nueces River Basin, we have 3 segments here on the map grouped together: the Upper Sabinal River, Seco Creek, and Hondo Creek. Segments 21, 11, 14, and 15. All 3 of those have a high aquatic life use in our water quality standards and aquifer protection uses as well. For the portions that overlie the aquifer zones, have, at least in the Upper Sabinal River, have two permits there currently. They're no discharge. And just a little caveat, when I say we have existing permits, that means the permits have been issued. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're actively, operating or up and running. Some are, some aren't. I think Lewis will probably talk a little bit about some of that that particular angle, but just want to make that clear as it occurred to me. In the Hondo Creek watershed, two discharge permits, although you see I've got an asterisk by the RR 417 permit, because that one's a little different than your average discharge permit in that it is a TPDES permit or discharge permit on paper, but just by requirement, it does not, or it requires 100% reuse. So it's, again, a little different. And of course, City of Hondo is the other discharge permit in that watershed. It doesn't have any phosphorus limits, but the RR 417 permit does. In Seco Creek, 1 discharge permit there, but not with any phosphorus requirements. And, sorry, withheld the table again. And then the last couple of segments in the Nueces River Basin watershed, the Upper Nueces River and the Upper Frio River, shown here. The Upper Nueces has a high aquatic life use in our standards, and the Upper Frio has an exceptional aquatic life use. Both segments do have the aquifer protection use for the relevant portions of those watersheds, and 1 permit each in both of those segments, and both of those are no discharge permits. Back in the Colorado River watershed, way out west, this is segment 1424, the middle Concho River, South Concho River, all one classified river segment, even though they're just disjunct areas there, upstream of San Angelo. The 2 segments each have high aquatic life use in our water quality standards, and each have 1 discharge permit within their watersheds, and both do not have any phosphorus requirements in their permit. And then last one, I believe, in the Rio Grande River Basin, I have several segments just to point out real quick. 2309, 2310, and 2013, Lower Pecos, Devils River, and San Felipe Creek. These, well, two of them have high aquatic life use, the Lower Pecos and San Felipe Creek segments. Devil's River has an exceptional aquatic life use. And the Devil's River watershed is actually the only one that has any existing permits within it, 2 discharge permits, and both of those not having any phosphorus requirements, and 2 no discharge permits. And just a couple things to kind of say, sort of big picture things as far as existing permitting within these watersheds, even statewide as well, is kind of what I want to lead off with. When we're talking about discharge permits in particular that have existing ones that have nutrient limits, namely phosphorus, total phosphorus requirements or limits. Just want to give you kind of a few summary statistics here. So again, on a statewide basis, we have 199 issued permits that have requirements for total phosphorus. The majority of those, 167, have numeric limits, and the remainder, 32, have monitoring reporting requirements. The flow range or effluent flow range that's in those permits, at least if they have more than one flow phase, we're referring to the final phase that they may not be operating in yet. That ranges from 0.01 to 100 million gallons per day, or MGD. And the range of the numeric total phosphorus limits that are in those permits goes from the lowest of 0.15 milligrams per liter up to 3 milligrams per liter. And again, statewide number regarding permits that have total nitrogen requirements have 9 with numeric limits, 2 of those being in more coastal settings, in estuaries settings, situations, 6 of those, 15 having just monitoring reporting requirements, and 1 of those being an estuarine permit. Going back to the total phosphorus, or permits with total phosphorus limits statewide, this map gives you a feel for where those permits are located, where those outfalls actually are located. The discharge points for those discharge permits, those red dots on the map. And, as you'll see, most are concentrated closer to, areas of higher population, larger cities. Quite a few are, you can see kind of up and down the I-35 corridor between here and San Antonio. A lot of those are just on the downstream end, if you will, of the Edwards Aquifer zones. There's some scattered around, with the DFW area. There's a lot of public water supply reservoirs in those areas that some of those are associated with. Maybe a few less in parts of the Houston area, but and then some scattered in different other places. But again, just to give you a feel of kind of where these limits are being applied currently. And then lastly, zoning in on just those 22 watersheds that we were talking about that were in the Pristine Streams petition. As far as the permits in those watersheds and the ones with total phosphorus requirements, there were 19 total discharge permits. 8 of those have total phosphorus requirements. 7 are numeric limits. 1 permit just with monitoring and reporting. The flow range of those is 0.025 to 4 MGD, and the limits are a little tighter and range from 0.15 to 1 milligram per liter. And then three permits or discharge permits have total nitrogen requirements that are within those watersheds. 2 of those are permits with limits. The other is monitoring and reporting. And then lastly, the majority of the permits in those watersheds, the 22 segment watersheds, are TLAP or no discharge permits. 44 of those. So with that, that concludes my presentation. I'll ask for any questions if anyone has any. And then the other thing about questions, I forgot to mention this early on. We can get you a microphone. There's someone coming up right now. If you could use that to ask your question, that way everyone here and online can hear you. So go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. That was really informative and had a lot of information that we were looking for. My name is Brian Zobczyk. I'm with Save Barton Creek Association. We're in one of the Pristine watersheds. I'm really curious about the nutrient limits for total phosphorus, because this is information that I've been trying to track down on my own. The lowest phosphorus limit that y'all have put in a permit is 0.15 milligrams per liter. My questions are, one, which permits have that limit of 0.15? And two, are any of those permits currently discharging at that limit?
Good question. I brought my list of permits just to make sure I answer correctly here, those kinds of questions. On the 0.15 limit permits, off the top of my head, I know the Hayes County WCID 1, otherwise known as, it serves the Belterra area, has a 0.15 milligram per liter total phosphorus limit. I do not believe I know their wastewater facility is operating, but I don't believe they've ever discharged. The other permits I could think of is Dripping Springs, City of Dripping Springs has that limit. Their permit's been issued, but they're not, I believe they're tied up in court right now and not operating, not discharging. And then lastly, at least another one, and someone can hopefully help me if I'm forgetting one. Yes, is Liberty Hill, City of Liberty Hill. They have a 0.15 milligram per liter limit in their permit, but it's in a flow phase that they have not achieved yet. So in other words, they're not discharging under that 0.15 limit. I believe they're discharging under the 0.5 milligram per liter limit currently. So.
Thanks. That was what my information was too. So is it correct to say that there is?
Thank you. That was what I was able to find out too. So is it correct to say that there is no permit that is currently discharging at the 0.15 lowest limit for phosphorus?
Correct. Right.
Hi, hello, I'm Ken Goldman. I was.
Sorry, I'm just 1 second, sir.
Yeah, that's my understanding. There are some facilities that are discharging less than 0.15, but they don't have limits, so they're achieving that, but they don't have limits that require them to achieve that at this time. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, we'd have to
Two
look into
things,
that.
and I'm Ken Goldman.
ahead.
I'm the attorney that filed the petition on behalf of a number of interested parties. First question I have is on the City of Junction. There's a M/R. What does that mean?
Yeah, I apologize. That's monitoring and reporting requirements. So in other words, they have to sample their discharge for phosphorus and report what their levels are.
Frequency?
I'm sorry.
On what frequency are they required to monitor and report? Is it?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. It'd be helpful if we got that information. The other thing I think would be helpful, the response as to who is actually discharging at less than 0.15 and whether or not they have any nutrient removal capabilities in their stream, or is it just due to dilution?
Got it. Thank you.
My name is Margot Denke Griffin from Friends of Hondo Canyon. I have a question about this particular slide you have up.
Yes.
You say 8 of 19 issued permits have total phosphorus requirements. Are those direct discharge TPDES permits?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you give us a list of those? Because I get a different number.
Sure. We can we can talk later. Yes, absolutely. One second. Louis, do you have something to say? Yeah, they're saying for City of Junction, the monitoring frequency in the permit should at least be once per week. It could be more, but we'd have to confirm that.
And Greg, we got a comment that the city of Burnett has a 0.15 milligram per liter phosphorus limit as well.
That's not what I have in my records. I don't believe Burnett has that. I believe they have a 0.5 milligram per liter limit. I don't know if there's maybe a pending application that they could be going lower, but we're only talking about permits that have been issued and not proposed ones. But anyway, sorry.
Hi, can you hear me? I'm Stephanie Morris. I live on the South San Gabriel River and have been involved with TCEQ for, well, since a mediation agreement with Liberty Hill in 2015. And the city of Liberty Hill, while they haven't officially moved, well, they're currently functioning technically without a permit because of, anyway, being in between phases, they did their actual, whether they officially had to or not, from December of 2021 through March of 2022, they were discharging less than 70 micrograms of phosphorus, 0.07 milligrams per liter of phosphorus for 4 months, in conjunction with significant, thank you for finally asking them to remove some of the algae and muck from the riverbed for about 300 feet roughly across the entire width of the riverbed, 50 feet upstream of the discharge, and about 100 yards actually downstream, so more like 400 feet. They had crews out there for weeks, day after day after day, removing algae, power washing the limestone riverbed and their outfall, and putting new rock on the outfall itself. And yet, within days, they couldn't even clean the whole river. There wasn't a point at which the entire riverbed, even just right there by the outfall, had the algae and muck removed because it grew back so quickly, even at 70 micrograms per liter. And this was with flow in the river. It wasn't as slow as it is now, but it grew back so quickly. So we do have a case of what happens. The South San Gabriel is the canary in the coal mine, showing us what happens. This is just a shot from March 27th of what it looks like after
Right.
they've removed all the algae and continue to discharge less than half of the strictest permit in the entire state. So.
And I just don't mean to necessarily cut you off, but you may have missed the initial announcement that I guess as we're doing presentations from TC's staff, we're answering questions about the presentations. We're going to reserve time for, larger comments later. But if you do have something
I'll stop now.
relative
It
to
was
the.
just about whether anybody is discharging less, whether we have a
Right.
case of what it looks like to discharge less than half of what the strictest permit is. So they did, until they figured out that they were making a case against themselves. They were making their own case that they need a stricter permit. So anyhow,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Is Burnett in one of the classified stream segments? I don't think it
Not that
is.
was in the.
Okay, so
the
I'm
rule
just saying,
petition.
right, it was not.
Correct.
So that is not one of the pristine stream segments listed for phosphorus.
That we talked about. That's correct.
I just have a question about the science, and maybe it should be later. But my understanding is that for there not to be algae blooms or problems in any of these pristine rivers, which are so sensitive, that actually the phosphorus had to be under 0.009 milligrams per liter or 0.01 milligrams per liter. And so that's a lot higher. I mean, that range you have there, the 1.5, seems like that would encourage the algae blooms, but maybe that's for later.
Yeah,
I was
we could
just
definitely
wondering
talk
how you
about
came
the
up
science
with
and
0.15 versus these lower amounts. Okay.
yeah, no, we can definitely talk about that.
Did
Hi.
you answer that, how you came up with 0.15? Sorry, did you already answer that? You just said,
Yeah, I just want to go ahead and second that. My question was going to be was how did y'all arrive at that 0.15 number for total phosphorus as being the lowest limit for that substance? I mean, basically, you know, like how did you decide, yes, this is the number it should be?
Yeah, and I'll just quickly say something about it, and we can certainly talk more about it during the public participation section. You know, I think, you know, from what I remember, you know, that Hayes County permit, you know, the Belterra permit was kind of the one of the first ones to, you know, where we contemplated limits lower than, you know, and you'll hear this in Peter's presentation coming up here in just a little bit, as far as some of the typical numbers in our implementation procedures that are recommended, you know, where we went below those. You know, so we kind of took into account, you know, what we knew as far as the science goes, as well as, you know, technology considerations, achievability of limits, and, you know, long story short, it was kind of a combination of those two things. I know that's not real, you know, quantitative, but that's kind of the short story. But yeah, we can certainly talk more about that later. Go ahead.
Slightly tangential. My name is Alex Ortiz. I'm with the Lone Star chapter of the Sierra Club. I just wanted to ask about the permits with total nitrogen requirements. 2 of them are numeric, 1 is monitoring and reporting, and you said 3 of those total are estuarine. Where are those located? Those estuarine permits? Nitrogen.
Oh, well, I think there weren't any estuarine for these pristine stream segments, but you're talking about the statewide.
I mean generally,
yeah,
the larger
sorry.
number. That's why, yeah.
Being picky there. Yeah, I believe the 2 I can think of off the top of my head, Rockport, city of Rockport. I think there's one in Aransas County. I can't remember the permittee name. Well, actually, I'm sorry, I do have the list here somewhere. Aransas County MUD. Municipal Utility District, and then what's the other? Sorry. Or is there? Hopefully I'm steering you right here. Aransas County, Rockport. Well, I don't see the other one. Maybe it should be just, I think maybe it's just 2 total, 1 with numeric, 1 without, but I'll have to go back and check those numbers.
But they're both sort of Corpus Christi, Rockport, mid-coast right there.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
Thank you.
Oh, and actually, sorry, I was wrong. City of Galveston, that kind of blows that out of the water, what I just said. So there's one upper coast, one that has,
Greg, we have a couple questions online. The first one is, so no permits with P limits at the native concentrations?
I'm sorry, say that again.
The first one is, so no permits with P limits at the native concentrations?
At the native concentrations?
Yes.
If I understand the question right, it sounds like, you know, so there's so no permits at the background concentrations is probably what I think they're asking. That's true to the degree that we know the background concentrations. We don't always have the luxury of knowing, certainly in smaller streams of what those levels are, so.
And then one more, what is the condition of the streams downstream of the discharges that should be removing P? How does that compare to the conditions upstream? That is, what are the observed impacts of P on these pristine streams?
So what are the conditions upstream and down of well, I mean, you know, we have some examples here of one permit, others. I mean, that's something that sometimes we in the permitting program do get feedback on, you know, whether it's from, you know, our regional offices who are kind of our eyes and ears out on the ground, and also from folks like you and the public who let us know. So, but yeah, I don't think I can make a blanket statement about, you know, all the different permit, upstream and downstream, conditions, just because, number one, they can change, over pretty quickly over time, or, but yeah, I'm afraid I can't really give a whole lot of, unless, Peter, you
Can I
want to
just
go
add
ahead?
a little bit? When we're reviewing permit applications, aerial imagery is really handy too, and that can sometimes show that there's something going on downstream.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is that all the questions? Thank you. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off to Peter here for his presentation so we can keep things going and make sure we leave you all enough time for the larger participation discussion section. So this is you, right? Why is it not resetting?
Click that, or did you just?
I thought I did, maybe I didn't.
There it goes.
All right, sorry. Do you know how to get to the presenter view?
Not exactly.
Hover over that.
Okay. Let's see. Is that yours?
I need to close mine out, maybe that'll help.
This is yours, okay. Oh, I see, 1, 2, I don't see 3 on there. All right, thank you. Yeah, I'm going to run through a description of how we screen wastewater permit applications to determine, first of all, if phosphorus limits are needed, and then secondly, how do we determine what that limit should be if they are needed. Not on that screen for some reason. Well, sorry about that, folks. We'll get this sorted out.
Take mine out. If that helps. There we go.
Okay. Okay. Our screening procedures are found in our document. It's called the Procedures to Implement the Texas Surface Water Quality Standards. And it's a 2010 document, and we refer to it in short, we call it our Implementation Procedures, or IPs for short. So I'll refer to it as our IPs as we go forward. And we've got two main methods for screening for nutrients. One involves numeric criteria, and the other involves narrative criteria. So for the numeric screening, that's mainly, well, that's only for reservoirs, and just select reservoirs that have chlorophyll A criteria in the standards, the Texas Surface Water Quality Standards. The result of that, or what we're looking at there, is it's more of a load-based approach. We're looking at annual loading rates going into reservoirs to manage that. It's a steady state, completely mixed model. For our narrative screening, that's used for streams and local effects in reservoirs, and that's, when we're looking at that, we're looking at more concentration-based limits. And the main factor here for these freshwater streams and reservoirs is total phosphorus. That's because total phosphorus is typically the limiting nutrient in these water bodies. So for the main pool screening model, we've got a number of variables. We're looking at essentially how big is the reservoir, what's the volume of wastewater going in there, what is the phosphorus concentration going into that reservoir, and also what is the retention time in the reservoir. So how long does water sit in this reservoir? So you can think of some large reservoirs where water will sit there for a long time, or think of Ladybird Lake down here, which is essentially a dammed up river, and the water goes through very swiftly. And of course, the chlorophyll A criterion, that's a big factor there. And so the model outputs, it's a kind of a two-part process. So it's sort of, if we determine that the estimated change in chlorophyll A is going to exceed 10%, then we go on to step 2, which is to estimate the change in chlorophyll A. And then in that last step, if the change in chlorophyll A is determined to be greater than 20%, then nutrient limits are needed, and we'll put nutrient limits in that particular permit to ensure that our model outputs will keep the change in chlorophyll A to less than 20%. And that last step is based on a regression equation of Texas reservoirs looking at the relationship of total phosphorus to chlorophyll A. And so moving on to the narrative criteria screening, and as I mentioned, this is what we're really interested in here for these streams. It's more the narrative, it's only the narrative criteria that we're looking at. And this, again, is in our IPs document. So we look at various site-specific characteristics of the water body, and we call these metrics, and this determines the sensitivity of the water body to algal growth through the addition of nutrients. And these metrics are scored, there's just 3 scores, low, medium, or high. And the scores are all added and then averaged as we go through our procedures. And if it's above a certain score, then we're usually looking at limits. If it's in a certain range, then it might just be monitoring. And if it's low, then no limits are needed at all. And finally, if we determine that limits are needed, we use a weight of evidence approach to determine what that limit should be. So I'll go into more detail on that here. So the site-specific characteristics that we're looking at, think of your garden or your lawn. What does your lawn need to grow green? It needs sunlight, it needs nutrients. And so for these water bodies, we're looking at the flow volume. So how much effluent is a wastewater facility proposing to put into a stream? We'll look at the stream flow within that stream, so how much flow is in that stream. So if you have a lot of effluent and very little flow in that stream, that's going to be effluent dominated, and then vice versa, of course. Then various factors that influence the growth of algae are bedrock bottoms over shallow water, shallow clear water over bedrock. That's really a recipe for growing algae if you add nutrients to it. Water clarity, of course, you have to have clear water. That's that sunlight getting down there to feed the chlorophyll. And shading, and another thing is tree canopy. So if you have a lot of tree canopy over the water body, it's not going to get as much sunlight. It's not going to be as susceptible to the growth of algae. Streamflow sustainability, again, I was talking about the flow. So is it just a Mississippi River flow coming through there, or is it a trickle, or is it just a pooled area? Is there no flow at all? We look at impoundments. Are there any impoundments on the water body which slow the water down and allow that phosphorus to kind of concentrate in that pooled area? We look at consistency with other permits. So what have we done with other permits, and has it worked or not? We look at listed concerns for nutrients in the Texas Integrated Report. So does this water body have any listed concerns? Is it impaired for nutrients, or is it, does it have concerns for nutrients? So all of these things we're looking at when we're going through these phosphorus screenings. And here, this is the Nueces River, and this is an example of minimal tree canopy. So you're not going to get any shading in that stream. It's going to all get into the water. And then moving over to East Texas, here you can see some clear-cut areas in some pine plantations, and that's a little hard to see on there, but there's a dendritic pattern there. It's just covered in trees. You can't see the stream, so there's very little sunlight getting down into there. Plus, in East Texas, you're going to have some mud or sand, clay or sand bottom substrate. The water's going to be more turbid, so you're not going to have that clear water. Sunlight's not going to get down in there to grow algae. Here's an example of an impounded creek. This is Little Joshua Creek. Then here's another example of an impounded creek, and then downstream of that impoundment is what I was talking about, that shallow, clear water over bedrock. That's just the kind of things we're looking for that just raise alarm bells saying algae is going to grow there if we add nutrients to it. And here's some on-the-ground pictures showing attached algae and aquatic vegetation. Now this is a healthy amount. This is not excessive. There's a little bit of algae on the rocks here and some aquatic plants that are growing, but it's not covering the stream. And here's another example. What we've got here is shallow water. You can see some floating algae, and then you can see some rocks and cobble, but everything in the water is just covered in this algae. And so all those interstitial spaces, those spaces between the rocks that the aquatic insects and fish like to utilize, is cut off from this. So this is what we're trying to prevent. And so this is a table taken straight out of our IPs. How far downstream do we look? This is guidance from our IPs. It shows the proposed flow. If it's less than 250,000 gallons a day, we call it 0.25 million gallons per day, or MGD. We'll look 3 or less miles downstream, or up to 3 miles downstream. 0.25 to 1 MGD, we'll look up to 7 miles downstream, and greater than 1, we might go as far as 15, maybe even more miles downstream, looking to see, just doing an assessment on whether nutrient limits are needed. And Greg was referring to this earlier. Again, keep in mind this document was written in 2010. Back then, 0.5 was the low limit. And so for proposed flows of 0.5 MGD or less, just the straight guidance out of here says, okay, 1 milligram per liter should be okay. Flows 0.5 to 3, 1 to 0.5, flows greater than 3, 0.5. We know this is not going to cut it in most hill country streams. And so we've got experience, we've got permits that have been issued with much lower limits, and so we know that this is good general guidance, but our experience shows us that we're going to go lower if we see something like I showed you earlier, where it's just clear water over a bedrock stream. And then our weight of evidence approach. So if our scores are high, then it's likely nutrient limits are needed. If we go through, the metric score is low, limits are not needed. We consider things like the effluent flow and stream flow. Like I said, using the Mississippi as an example, if we have a small discharge going into something the size of the Mississippi, probably don't need nutrient limits. Of course, we don't have that in the hill country. And so on the flip side of that, if there's not a lot of flow, that definitely goes into our consideration. Shallow bedrock versus deep cobble, or a lot of tree canopy over sand, silt, substrate. that's going to be less likely to need a limit. And as I mentioned, we consider permitted discharges to similar streams. And more lately, we've been trying to, for applicants that are proposing to discharge to certain streams, we'll say, hey, look, you know, we've had other people try to discharge here. It's going to end up in hearing. That's going to take a lot of time to get your permit. That's going to take a lot of money to go through the courts. Why don't you look at TLAP? You know, let's look at other options. Can you reduce your flow? Can you do a combination of TLAP and discharge to reduce your flow? Are there any other wastewater facilities nearby that you can go to? Regionalization. Can you reuse that water? Chapter 210 reuse. It makes much more sense to water common areas, golf courses, whatever, with wastewater, treated effluent than to use drinking water. So we encourage that. And also moving the outfall location. Can you, where are you located? Are there other water bodies that you can go to that are not as sensitive? So we look at all kinds of options and try to let these folks know that, hey, if you try to discharge here, you're going to end up with a really low nutrient limit. It's probably going to go to hearing, and it's going to take a long time to get your permit if you even do get it. Okay. So with that, I will entertain any questions you have. I see two hands over there, one over here. There's some microphones coming here.
Hi, how do you account for other methods of introducing nutrients into receiving waters? I mean, wastewater treatment plants aren't the only thing that can add these nutrients. I mean, fertilizer washing off, poor septic tanks.
Exactly, yeah.
And even decaying vegetative material from the trees and what have you around. It's full of nutrients. As it dies off, first rainwater is going to put that in the stream. So how do you take all of that into account in addition to what a wastewater treatment plant is discharging?
Of course, we can't permit that through our wastewater system, but there is a TMDL program that looks at non-point sources, and if there are non-point sources that are contributing to these problems, then a TMDL can work with stakeholders to address those issues. And you mentioned leaves can get into the stream. That's an interesting thing that happens in the springtime or late winter. A lot of times you'll see pristine streams that don't have any dischargers into them growing algae, and you'll think, what's happening here? What's going on? And it's those leaves that have fallen in the fall. They've sat down in the bottom of the stream. They've released their nutrients, and then when the photo period increases and the water temperature increases, it starts growing algae. So it's an interesting phenomenon. Okay, we've got one there and then one in front.
Thank you. Scott Norman, Texas Association of Builders. Is the process for the review that you went through the same on a permit renewal for an existing permit as it is for a new permit?
Thank you. That's a great question. This process is intended for new permits or permits that are amending to increase flow. So for permit renewals, we don't go through the screening process, but we can, if we notice that there are issues downstream, we can impose limits on those facilities. But we try to take care of that on the front end, because for wastewater facilities going through a permit renewal, they haven't funded for plant upgrades and that sort of thing. So it's best that we take care of that on the front end. But if we do notice on the back end that, hey, for whatever reason it's not happening, there's algae growing downstream, we can impose more stringent limits.
Does that explain why many of these permitted municipal facilities that are in some of these stream segments that may be 50 plus years old don't have any limits?
Exactly, yes.
Thank you.
And you may have these documents in front of you, but the permit limits are sequentially numbered. So if you have a permit number that's a 10 something, that's going to be an early permit that was issued a long time ago. Right now, the latest permits we're issuing are like a 160000. So, yeah, those older permits, we just hadn't started putting nutrient limits in those permits yet, and so a lot of them don't have limits. Okay, and I know she had a question too. Okay, gotcha, good.
Hi, my name is David Price. I'm with the Texas Rivers Protection Association. One question I have is y'all were looking downstream based upon certain flow data. And I think the first one, I mean, y'all said it was the 250,000 gallons a day. Y'all were looking 3 miles downstream as a for instance.
Yes.
And I'm curious on the permits that I guess are contested, why is that limit on the downstream property owners significantly different than what y'all actually use in your criteria?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's my understanding, somebody might be able to help me out here, that is based on rule. So our nutrient screening procedures are not rule, they're guidance, but I believe the distance downstream for contested case hearing affected status is based on rule.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. Anthony Tate with the Environmental Law Division, and I'll probably be repeating a little bit of something I'm going to talk about later on. In terms of what we look at for determining whether someone is an affected person, we have some general guidelines, and distance and proximity is one of the things that we do look at to determine who's an affected person. But in the rules, and when we evaluate these hearing requests, we don't have any strict distance locations. And I know there's definitely the perception out there that the ED looks at within a certain mile radius, but we really don't do that. And we consider all factors when we're considering whether or not someone is an affected person or not.
Well, a quick follow-up to that, can that rule be changed? Because if that's essentially arbitrary, that's limiting greatly the people downstream, because these nutrients, especially based upon flow, they're generally not used up. And also in low flow conditions, what happens, they're essentially stored. Now, whether it's in the soils or whatnot, if it's, as you say, it changes the chemical characteristics and the ability to bind, but those then flush in rainfall events like we're having now. So that's flushing far downstream, sometimes all the way to the coast. So I guess my question is can we get that, since it's simply an interpretation, can we increase those distances downstream?
Well, let me just answer it this way. I mean, any rule that the agency has can be changed through a rulemaking process. I think I would just take a little bit of an exception to say that it's essentially an arbitrary process when we look at these hearing requests, because we do look at a lot of different factors depending on the facility, depending on the volume, that type of thing.
Hi, I'm Robin Gary with the Watershed Association. Thanks for your presentation. It definitely helps to understand the review process. I have 2 questions. Number 1, do you use Clean Rivers Program data in your review process? Because that would give you kind of baseline condition metrics for nutrient criteria. And then 2, is there any effort to update the 2010 standards?
Yeah, great questions. To look at baseline nutrient, baseline phosphorus information in the stream, we don't really look at the Clean Rivers Program data for that, because we understand it's going to be low, and sometimes that data it can be the detection limits, the nutrients in the stream might be lower than the detection limits, so we don't really, I guess, I hate to say it, but we don't really need that information, because we're assuming it's already a very low number there. The baseline conditions are very low. We do often go to the Clean Rivers data for other information. It's a really handy resource. It's got a lot of great data. We do go to it often for any number of data that we need from the water, if it's TDS or you know, just whatever kind of data we're looking for, we do regularly go there.
And then the second part of the
Oh,
question
I'm sorry, the
was
second-
no, the updating the 2010 standards.
Yes, it's currently being revised, and we hope to get the new edition out in 2023.
Well, and real quick, by standards, are you talking about the implementation procedures? Yes, thank you.
Hi, Trey Larry with ABHR. I just want to thank you for your presentation, because sometimes I think in this conversation, it sounds like a prohibition on the TCEQ being able to grant permits is what is needed, because the TCEQ does not have the ability to review and scrutinize permits on an individual basis, on a fact-specific basis, and then that you don't have tools then to deal with people who are seeking wastewater solutions in that area. You've shown us that it is not that way at all, that you do have the ability to look at stream impacts, that you are looking at them on a case-by-case basis, and that you do have tools to promote better environmental solutions. To me, that is exactly what a regulatory permitting agency does, rather than not have an ability at all. So thank you for pointing all that out.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, there's a misconception that we rubber stamp permits, and it's a rigorous technical review process. We've got various different technical reviewers that have expertise in different areas, and we each take a look at the permit and add our expertise to it before it gets to a permit writer that drafts it all up.
Hi, Brian Zobczyk from SBC again. I've got two questions. Second is going to be a follow-up for the lawyer, but first for you, Peter. First of all, thank you. This is really helpful. I'm curious about the distinction between numeric criteria for reservoirs and narrative for streams, and I'm wondering if that's because TCEQ has issued numeric criteria for surface water quality for reservoirs, and it has not for streams yet.
Yes, that's exactly right. We need the numeric criteria, and it's a difficult thing. I'm sure you probably know it's a difficult thing to come up with numeric criteria for a stream. That there are a number of factors involved there, and it's a difficult process. So we've got the narrative procedures right now that we use, and we're getting more information all the time, and we appreciate these venues to help further our understanding of everything, and just it's a good opportunity for all of us, I think.
So the reason I was asking that is that it does seem that TCEQ is taking quite a while to develop nutrient criteria for surface water quality for streams. The only category that they've done so far is that y'all have done so far is reservoirs. My understanding was that y'all were going to do streams next, but then you changed to basin estuaries, and then you'll do streams. And if I did the math right, it's kind of like the rate you're going. It's something like 2035 will be when stream nutrient surface water quality criteria will be issued. So that's, I guess I would just sort of like, not as a question, but as like a comment, it would be great if that process could be speeded up, especially since we know now that establishing surface water quality nutrient criteria can help affect the wastewater nutrient criteria. And then my second question was for the attorney. Thank you so much for the information about contested cases. And I understand that you say that there is not a hard and fast rule, that it's only like 1 mile. I remember like listening to the commissioners meeting when they certified additional parties for the Liberty Hill contested case hearing and went up to, I think, either 3 or 3.5 miles. However, I'm just not aware of any other contested cases, at least recently, where affected parties have been certified past 1 mile. And part of what we're hoping to get from this discussion today is hopefully information from y'all that we haven't been able to find out on our own. So if there is a possibility that you are able to provide that information to us on the distance of affected parties in recent contested case hearings, that would be really great and helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
Hey there, Catherine Romans with the Hill Country Alliance. You made a comment about you may look at a stream and see that crystal clear water and a rock bottom and, you know, only a few inches of water. And you said if we're adding nutrients to the system, we know algae will grow. And I was just curious if the TCEQ has ever denied a permit application based on those sorts of circumstances, seeing a system that will likely be impacted.
We do have the ability to call degradation on a water body or on a permit application and say, you know, hey, if this is issued, it's going to degrade the waters. We don't typically do that. We don't like to issue permits that we think are going to degrade the waters. And so, like I mentioned, the alternatives that we go through, you know, we talk to the applicant and we say, hey, look, this is not the best place for a discharge. Let's look at TLAP. Let's look at, you know, reducing your flow. What can we do? And so that's happened on a number of occasions where we've worked with the applicant and they've done different things. There was one instance where we proposed a very low nutrient limit, and the applicant ended up withdrawing their permit. So they just decided, okay, we're not going to get a discharge permit for this area that they were proposing. So that's far more common than issuing a permit where we're making a call that says, you know, there's going to be degradation here.
Alex Ortiz, Sierra Club again. I wanted to ask, touching on the non-point source pollution, going back a little bit, of the 22 pristine streams, how many of them are actually on the impaired waters list and subject to TMDL development? And of those 22, how many of them actually have TMDLs to deal with non-point source pollution? Do you know?
I would think fairly few, if any, are impaired for nutrients. Do you know, by any chance? Oh, great. We've got Jill.
My name's Jill Secketts. I'm with the TCEQ Water Quality Planning Division. So a number of these streams are impaired. None are impaired for nutrients. I don't believe any have an actual TMDL approved, you know, in Category 4. But we can look and check and get you that information and report back.
Do you recall, you made reference to a nutrient limit that was basically encouraged the applicant to go away from discharge. What do you recall what that specific limit was?
It was 0.05.
Okay. And can you think of any permit renewals that have been granted a request for an anti-degradation review prior to a permit renewal for an existing permit?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand that.
An anti-degradation review. So this, I believe similar to, or maybe even the process that you've described prior to an initial permit being granted for evaluating the water body or stream segment.
Right.
Whether, I think of that as an anti-degradation review, whether that I believe you said it could be granted. That could be done for a renewal, but it's not usually. Can you think of any time that it has been done for a renewal?
Yeah, we don't do an anti-degradation review on renewals, but we can impose limits on, we can impose nutrient limits if there are none, or we can impose more stringent limits on a permit in a renewal. So, but that's not an anti-degradation review, because that's a different process that's reserved for instances where there is an increase in pollution to waters in the state proposed from that action. But you asked for an example of where that has happened. The city of Liberty Hill, that was that up for a renewal? Yes. Yeah, that was up for a renewal, and we imposed more stringent limits on that. So we made it so when the permit is reissued, the 0.15 limits will take effect.
Well, just to clarify, so that's still a pending application, the renewal application with the city, and it actually involved causing the 0.15 limit to go into effect sooner than it would have if we had not, made that change.
An anti-degradation review was requested and denied, but even though the permit limits might look like they are lower, when the volume of effluent will be exponentially increasing, thusly creating a wastewater river as opposed to a wastewater discharge into a river, those permit limits aren't actually lower than significantly than what's currently being discharged.
Yeah,
So
they're-
it would be called for under your explanation of when to do it.
The concentration limits would be lower. The loading, I'm not sure how that would work out. So the loading takes the flow into account.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, we got one more over here.
Good afternoon. Peter, appreciate your information here. One thing you said, and my ears perked up. You said that you have entered into negotiations with applicants that sometimes resulted in no discharge permit being issued. Punchline to that, do you have the authority to say no? Do you have the authority to mandate a TLAP system for an applicant?
We can't mandate a TLAP. We have to review the application that's put before us, so we can't get a discharge permit and say, no, make it a TLAP permit, but we certainly can encourage them to do that, or we can say, okay, if this is what you want, if you want a discharge permit here, you're gonna have some really strict limits, or sometimes there are limits, especially when it comes to DO, that there's no effluent set that could be reasonably achieved, and so we can't issue those permits. So we just got to go back to the drawing board with the applicant on this.
Does TLAP become then the default?
It can, but TLAP doesn't work everywhere. In East Texas, where water's, where there's a lot of rain, it doesn't work so well. Other areas, people, developers might not want to use their land for TLAP, so it just, it helps. It is definitely a solution that can help applicants out to get their wastewater permit one way or another, but we can't force them to go that route.
So kind of summing up, you have the authority to deny a discharge permit.
We do have the authority to deny, but more often than deny, I guess by saying there's no effluent set that we can give you that you would technologically be able to achieve.
Yep.
By doing that, we're essentially denying their permit.
Okay, and so that does not evolve into TLAP. You're just saying that you can just deny the permit and then negotiate with the applicant to move to an alternate method.
Figure out something that'll work. All right, I think that's it for the questions. So we'll move on to Baltazar and Lewis Heron. Let me see if I can get them.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. And while they're transitioning, I just want to let folks know online. I know that we do have some questions that are pending, but for the sake of time, we want to try to get through these presentations so we can, again, get to the larger discussion part, since this is. But yeah, no, certainly appreciate the questions and definitely want to provide answers. So, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I'm going to be talking about treatment technologies now. My co-presenter is going to be Luis. He will be talking about optimization of existing treatment plants for phosphorus removal. The available treatment technologies. We will review treatment technologies options, including biological, chemical addition, and membrane technologies, as well as a combination of the different technologies, biological, physical, and chemical. And then we will see the treatment level that each technology can achieve from properly designed and operated wastewater treatment plants. Biological phosphorus removal. I believe I should mention that currently TCQ is revising Chapter 217, the design criteria for wastewater treatment plants. And we will include this as part, we anticipate that we will include this as part of the revision. I will speak first about the common process configurations, biological process configurations. Regarding process design requirements, this is that we anticipate to include in Chapter 217 revision. We anticipate that the preliminary sizing of the phosphorus removal facility with the standard design criteria and optional use of modeling software for process design, for final design and design optimization. Some of the parameters, the design parameters that will be included are, of course, we need to know what is the influent characteristics in terms of the volatile fatty acids, which is an important parameter for biological phosphorus removal, the readily biodegradable chemical oxygen demand, and some ratios between the carbon to phosphorus. Other parameters include the solids retention time, SRT, the mixed liquid suspended solids, hydraulic retention time, HRT, dissolved oxygen limits, and the internal recycle rates. We will include also the operational and control parameters. And here are some of the most common biological process configurations for phosphorus removal. This is the most simple, which is basically, I should mention that all of these processes, the common process, are, they utilize the activated sludge process. In this case, this is the most simple, the anaerobic oxic AO process, which uses basically an anaerobic zone and aerobic zone. So it's a basin that is divided into two zones, anaerobic, which is, and followed by aerobic. These two zones are critical for biological phosphorus removal. Each of these phases has its own function, important function. The other, we can see that the anaerobic, aerobic zones are followed by a secondary clarifier, where we are going to separate the biomass of the mixed liquid from the clarified effluent. And then we have the effluent, which goes normally to disinfection or tertiary treatment. The sludge is separated in the, with the sludge with the phosphorus is separated in the secondary clarifier. The sludge needs to go to sludge processing. And then we need to return part of the biomass to the activated sludge. Then we have the anaerobic, anoxic, oxic. Here we need to add another zone, which is the anoxic in the middle. So we have anaerobic, anoxic, and aerobic zones. We also have a secondary clarifier, return activated sludge. And as you can see, we have an internal recycle from the aerobic to the anoxic zones. We are basically recycling nitrates. Nitrates and dissolved oxygen, they have a detrimental effect on the anaerobic zone. So we need to remove those. And that's the reason of including the anoxic zone. Then we have the UCT, the University of Cape Town process. Again, this is a three-zone. We have three zones here, anaerobic, anoxic, and aerobic. A secondary clarifier. But as you can see, we have 2 internal recycles. So we are adding, the processes are getting more complex. We have here 2 internal recycles in addition to the conventional return activated sludge recycle. We have the Johannesburg process. In these, we have 4 steps or 4 zones. We have an anoxic, followed by anaerobic, another anoxic, and aerobic. Again, we have another anoxic in order to keep removing the nitrates, because we don't want the nitrates and the dissolved oxygen in the anaerobic zone, which is the first step for the phosphorus removal. And the West Bank enhanced biological phosphorus removal process. This is similar to the previous one. The only difference here is that the effluent is being fed into the anoxic zone instead of the anaerobic zone. And finally, we have the 5-stage modified Barton process, one of the first processes for biological phosphorus removal. Here we are talking about more infrastructure, of course, 5 zones. We have an anaerobic followed by anoxic, aerobic, another anoxic, and a final aerobic zone. So it's a lot of tanks followed by a clarifier. We have 1 internal recycle for nitrates being recycled from the aerobic to anoxic zones, and the conventional return activated sludge recycle. Recently, we have new technologies like the membrane bioreactors. The membrane bioreactors can be used with almost with all of the previous process configurations that I mentioned. Here is an example. Here is not very clear, but the process flow diagram on the upper side is the conventional secondary activated sludge with a secondary clarifier. And the process, the diagram below is the one that is using the membrane bioreactor instead of the secondary clarifier. We also have another method, is the phosphorus removal by chemical addition. This is probably the most utilized right now in the state for phosphorus removal. It's proven technology. The chemicals that are the most common or most utilized chemicals are alum and ferric chloride. Chemical addition points, it can be fed to the primary treatment, the secondary treatment, or to the activated sludge reactor, or to tertiary treatment. Some of the process design requirements include the mixing requirements, the chemical feed, and storage requirements. I should mention that the chemical treatment is the most common method so far for phosphorus removal, and is able to meet effluent concentrations below 1 milligram per liter. The treatment levels that can be achieved from properly designed and operated wastewater treatment processes. The first row is for the conventional and extended duration activated sludge, is the secondary treatment. As basically there is going to be some removal by assimilation into the cell mass of the bacteria. We are talking here an achievable effluent of 4 to 10 milligrams per liter in the effluent. Then the second row is the one of the processes that I just mentioned, the anaerobic oxic. With that technology, we can achieve 0.5 to 2 milligrams per liter. Then the anaerobic anoxic aerobic, that technology can achieve concentrations, effluent concentrations, total phosphorus concentration 1 to 2 milligrams per liter. And then the 5-stage modified Barton flow, that can be the following concentrations can be achieved, 0.5 to 2 milligrams per liter. The University of Cape Town, again, that can provide 0.5 to 2 milligrams per liter. And the Johannesburg, that can be that can achieve 0.1 to 0.5 milligrams per liter. And the last one is with the chemical phosphorus removal, can achieve concentrations of less than 0.1 milligrams per liter. Again, the Johannesburg and the chemical phosphorus, those low concentrations are going to need definitely a combination of biological, tertiary, and chemical phosphorus removal. And then Luis is taking over. Yes, sir.
All of those, in order to reach those levels, require a full-time operator 24 hours a day on site in order to achieve those levels.
Yes, definitely. These are complex operations. The biological, the phosphorus removal, specifically with biological processes, are complex operations that require 24 hours operation.
Bill, sir, repeat his question because he's not being heard on the internet.
That would be a Class 1 operator on site 24 hours a day to achieve those, correct?
It depends. It would, it would depend on the size of the facility, if it needs to be a Class A, Class B operator. The larger the facilities, the higher the grade.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to talk about the kind of how to optimize some existing plants. And to be honest with you, a lot of the existing plants, if they were not designed to put in phosphorus, it is going to be very difficult. And probably the only ways that they're going to be able to do it realistically is either through chemical additions or to put in MBR or a membrane type system. But some of the things that they can do is to, wait a minute. Is to modify the aeration chambers. And just to let y'all know, all these slides will be posted on the internet. So y'all don't have to take pictures of every slide. Because I see, huh? Well, that's fine, but I'm just telling you. I see everybody, every time a slide comes up, I see all these cameras come up. They will be posted, just to let you know. And the people on the internet, they will be posted, next day, a couple days from now? A couple days from now. I have no problem having my picture taken. But what I'm saying is some of these plants can be modified. They can be sectioned off and to put anaerobic or anoxic zones in. But you're going to have to train your operators. A lot of operators are not familiar with this, so there's got to be a lot of training. There's got to be a lot of things. And they're going to have to learn to adjust their mixed liquor. They're going to have to adjust their food to mass ratio and stuff of that nature. But we can do this. One of the things that y'all should know is back when the states put in the anti-phosphates in your laundry detergent, the amount of phosphates in the state dropped in half. The problem is you're starting to see them kind of go up now at some of the wastewater treatment plants, but it's not because we're increasing the phosphates, it is because we're using less and less water. So dilution is not there that we had before. But going back into optimization, you have to kind of look at each plant. Each plant can do it. It's depending if they have the land to do it and stuff of this nature. If they don't have the land, they're going to have to go chemical feed. But then it's going to be another problem, going to produce a lot more sludge, and it's going to have a higher operation, and people are going to have to be maintaining it a lot more. And one of the things that's going to be probably the cheapest thing to do is most activated sludge processes will probably be adding chemical additions, and they'll probably be putting in an MBR, taking out their clarifiers and putting in membranes. Because a membrane itself can get it down to a 1. With the chemical addition, you get it down to much lower. We do have some pond systems in the system on the discharge side, and I also said some primaries, but the primaries are more on the TLAP side. Those systems, if we end up putting phosphorus limits on them or nutrient limits on it, they're going to have to be totally rebuilt, because pond systems, there is really no way to remove this, the phosphates from them. And I'm going to give you a kind of a current what's sitting out there. In the watershed, there are 44 TLAP permits, as we've talked about before. They're either irrigation or evaporation. 7 of them are currently inactive, according to the list that I was looking at earlier this week. 5 of them are evaporation permits. 22 are what we call SAD permits. They're subsurface drip permits. 18 are surface irrigation permits. 3 have some form of nutrient limits on them, and that could be either report, or they have a total nitrogen or nitrate limits on them. I don't think any of them have a phosphate. I think there's one that has a phosphorus limit on it. And 6 of them are basically primary or pond systems, where it's a 30-90, where it's a rough, where they're not treating fully, but they're irrigating the back 40 someplace. And most of these things are real small, like 20,000 gallons a day and stuff of that nature. The other ones, the 19 permits, Greg has talked about a lot of them, but 2 of them, the 19, according to the list I saw, are inactive. 7 have a total phosphorus limit. 4 have a, 4, it's supposed to be 3, have a total nitrogen limit, or is required to report. And 3 of them are pond systems, which are 30-90 systems in the area. And I think that is my last slide. I've tried to do it quick, but I can go into a lot more detail on any of the stuff that you want to talk about. Any questions? No questions. Thank you.
Well, hold on. Louis, we do have one question, at least online. So if I understand what has been presented here, there is hardly any technology available that could attain background or non-degradation phosphorus levels, correct?
It's depending on what the background number is.
If it's undetectable.
If it's just to let you know, the lowest phosphorus permit I know that's written in the country right now is 0.02.
Where is that?
It's up in the Seattle, Washington area.
So in other words, there's no way to technically match an undetectable limit at this current point in time.
Eventually, you maybe want to give him a mic so people on the outside. The question is, can you match the background?
Yeah, my question was, there is technically no way to match an undetectable phosphorus limit at this current point in time with all of this technology that you've been through.
If it's undetected in the background, I don't see how we can take 100% out in any of the treatment processes as of right now. There may be some technology out there, but I'm not aware of any.
Okay, thank you.
You guys did a great job talking about how complicated these processes are. I know that operating them has got to be one level of complexity, but maybe you could talk a little bit about monitoring and compliance for these systems. So how do you know that these systems are performing as designed?
The only way that we know is what they self-report, or what we get complaints, or when we go out for inspections. We're not monitoring them 24/7.
Would you talk about the frequencies of self-reporting, and then how often you guys go out for inspections, or what would trigger an inspection?
Each plant is scheduled for an inspection, and it's based on if it's a major or minor. And I'm not in enforcement, so I can't really answer these questions, but they do have a routine on how often they go out there. But if there's complaints, they're usually out there within 24 hours of a complaint. It's depending on time of day and what the complaint is. but I can't really answer enforcement or their questions because I'm not in that program. I'm on the permitting side, and I'm basically on the design side. So if there is a problem with a plant, Beldessar, myself, and the other engineer, Paul, we work with enforcement in the cities to see how we can get them back in compliance. With, sometimes it's just some simple operation. Sometimes there's a lot of other information. But I think the main thing is we look at self-reporting, and they do go out there periodically and inspect the plants. But I don't know what that cycle is.
Frequency of monitoring, that's going to be in the permits.
Yeah, the frequency, at a minimum, for most discharge permits, it's at least, they have to take samples at least once a week. Then as the plant goes up in size, it goes to daily, and the composites get more enhanced as the flows go up.
On your drip irrigation systems coming out of your, let's just say somebody's turns in a permit and they're going to go with the drip system on it. Do y'all have a couple of questions here? One, do y'all see the permits coming back? Let's say if they're contested case permit and they say go back to design, let's change the limits. Do you have a feel for the time frame on a permit coming back to y'all versus one that's submitted initially on a drip irrigation with a zero discharge?
Feroce, you can probably answer that better than I can.
Well, if the permit was issued on the SAD, like subsurface dispersal system, it's not working? Okay. How about this now? I'm sorry. So let me understand the question. You said if the permit was issued on the SAD system, subsurface drip system, and coming back and changing the permit?
Well, let's say a discharge versus zero discharge. So let's say y'all issue a discharge permit. It goes through a contested case hearing. I guess first is how long do y'all normally see that taking? And then if it comes back, let's say there's reduced phosphorus limits that are agreed to, if it comes back to y'all, what is your feel? And again, I'm not trying to pin you down on a number on that total time frame versus a permit that was originally submitted as a zero discharge.
Well, let me give a little bit of our current practice. What we are doing right now, we have pre-application meeting. So we encourage people to come back before even consider application for regardless whether TIPDIS permit or TLAP permit, When we look at some of the site-specific area where we see is like Pristine stream or some sensitive watershed, we're trying to discourage people to even TIPDIS permit, period. You don't see those applications in the notice, period. Most of the time, our discussion will be geared toward the TLAP. And I was about to give some talk after Louis that what kind of options we talk about, depend on the land availability when we had the surface irrigation versus subsurface, and or maybe the evaporation pond, some of the options we have on the TLAP, it depends on the type of the land availability, because sometimes people are stuck with limited land. Well, SAD system may help them because it's a little bit smaller footprint, but 100% efficiency in the application rate, and only 3 days storage required minimum. Well, surface irrigation, some area may not be allowed, like Edward Aquifer, recharge zone, and some of the area that we think, that's not going to happen. So for us, when we look at the SAD system and surface versus subsurface, TIPDIS is totally out of the picture. Like people, we cannot do the TIPDIS because of the sensitive watershed issue. Why would we be wasting their time? And whatever the permit we ever issued, even TIPDIS permit, you think Onion Creek and Belterra and some other permit, Dripping Spring, they have conditions they agreed upon, they're never ever going to discharge. Well, it was just a bragging right for someone to have the TIPDIS permit, but it's not going to have a TIPDIS permit as they consider, because if you look at the RR 417, one of the permit was talked about earlier, that it's a discharge permit on the piece of paper. But if you look at condition, 100% zero discharge. Well, we are trying to discourage people coming through this kind of permitting process, because for us, unknowingly, and whenever we see this public input, because the first notice is a good indicator for us, we have talked to some of the consultant or the permittee or developer in the early stage of the permit. So some of the things you don't even see that. What you see is some people are literally made up their mind, no, we are going to go through this discussion, TIPDIS permit, just like Belterra and Dripping Spree, and hey, I want to go take this permit. Guess what? At the end of the day, if you look at the permit, it is not discharge permit. It is 100% look like maximum reuse and using all options, you know. So for us, whenever we see this kind of a troubling issue with the tip dish permit, and yes, on the technology limitation we have, you know, I think that we are blessed with a big landscape here in Texas, so we never had that issue like Seattle and California, and those people, they had to scramble for every single inch of the property. So therefore, the technology, maybe they have used in 0.02 milligram per liter, at least the phosphorus they have in the permit. I think USGS has a study done. I don't have the actual copy, but you know, they had the study. If you Google, you will find the study. How about 10 plus permits in they put the study, and their performance was 0.02. If you look at this, when I was talking to one of the EPA folks in the New York, Syracuse has a 0.02 milligram phosphorus limit, you know. So if you look at some of the technology, I don't think an undetectable technology have any, you know, technology we have ever found, as Louis mentioned, because some of the our limitation is the technological limit. When Greg and Peter talk about how they screen our narrative criteria, you know, but now we are finding out more that some of the background condition is much stricter than what you think. So no matter what you put is going to show up, just like Liberty Hill, you are trying to show some pictures, you know, say, look at whatever, even 0.07 milligram per phosphorus, you know. But depending on the condition on the stream, and each one is varies. So going back to your question, you know, the SAD system, you know, people do change their mind to come back. Hey, I don't think we had one permit came as a SAD permit. No, tip dish permit, it protested so bad, they changed the tip dish SAD permit, you know. When even SAD permit, somebody withdrew eventually.
Right.
Okay, second part of the question, I guess, I'm not sure we got a time frame, but I guess the second part is on the treatment level, and you probably know this, Louis. If you're using drip irrigation, essentially the soils, and this kind of jumps over to the 285 version, or the 285 section of the administrative code, is the treatment level doesn't have to be as high because y'all allow crop nutrient uptake, do you not, which handles the nitrogen and the phosphorus? Now, I know there's some soil monitoring conditions on that, but you're essentially using the soil and the crops as part of your treatment system.
That is correct, but the one thing you have to remember about a SAD system, under federal law, they're a type 5 injection well, which means they have to have a higher level of treatment once the water leaves the root zone. So so we are looking at that, but we don't allow stuff to percolate. We don't use the 285 rules. We have to make sure that most of those nutrients are going to be used up in the root zone.
Right, and that's my thing, because I know some of the permits that we've done is that you actually, there's an old study that talks about nutrient crop uptake.
Right.
And then you have to of course, crop management on the field, but just kind of a reiteration or I guess an acknowledgement that that does exist. And so that is indeed an alternative to the issues with phosphorus that people are talking about, the background limit. Because if that stuff never leaves the site, then the issue doesn't exist.
It gets bound up in the soils, yes.
Correct.
But the one thing you have to remember about a SAD system, it cannot be done over the recharge zone because there's a prohibition for type 5 injection wells, which by federal definition, the SAD systems are prohibited to be over the recharge zone. So there is a limitation on where you can put these things.
We had somebody over here, then we'll.
And in the agenda, it says incentives to use alternatives. And what are the incentives that we're talking about?
Yeah, and for the sake of time, we may maybe just have a quick summary on that. But let's get to that after this topic's over. But yeah, thank you for asking that.
Earlier, the statement was made that because these plants are so complex, they needed to have an operator on site 24 hours a day. That's not quite accurate. The technology that we have now with all the computers that are at a wastewater treatment plant and the telemetry, basically the plants are automated for the most part. with set points that set off alarms, and the operators, you might have a limited number of operators that are watching the system. But when it alarms, it gets an immediate response. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have somebody at the plant site 24 hours a day.
I don't think Balthasar or I said that you have to have there somebody there 24 hours. It depends on the size of the plant.
Absolutely.
And it depends on how complicated the plant is. I agree. We have a lot of plants now are being run by SCADA and stuff like this, so it's being monitored remotely. And we have operators that are close by that can take care of any problems that arise. But you have to, there is no blanket statement that somebody has to be there 24/7. It depends on the design of the plant, depends on the location of the plant, it depends on the size. There's a lot of factors that will go into that. There is no, in wastewater business, there is not a silver bullet, unfortunately, that will cover all situations.
I just wanted to make sure that that was clarified.
Okay.
Hey, Brian from SBCA again. Thank you so much. That was really helpful. One slide that I really loved was the one, because I'm a nerd and love this stuff, one slide that I really loved was the one that showed the treatment levels that can be achieved from wastewater treatment process, where we basically went through what level of phosphorus removal could be achieved with each treatment process. And this is all really good. I'm kind of curious though, are any plants in Texas using any of these systems? Also have a follow-up question.
Yes, the answer is yes. We have a number of plants actually using those the biological processes.
Okay, and what about in the Pristine Streams watershed? Are any of those discharge permits using?
That's a good question.
Okay, great. I mean, you can come back to us later and send out
yes.
this information. But these are the type of questions we've been trying to answer ourselves and haven't been. And I'm curious about, so Louis, you said the chemical phosphorus removal is probably the best and cheapest and easiest if you're adding on to an existing plant. Do you have any idea on cost? I mean, if we're talking, like most of the Pristine Streams discharge plants are at 1 million MGD or below, so let's just go ahead and say up to 1 million. How much would it cost to add that?
If you would have asked me a couple years ago, I can give you a ballpark figure. Nowadays, there's no way. The way prices are going up and things are changing, my rule of thumbs are gone that I would have. In the past, I would say it would cost you about $5 a gallon for the O&M and operation and all that. But I think it's going to be much higher nowadays. But to answer your question, I can't.
Is that because like the chemicals like alum and the like are more? Or the prices are erratic?
Basically, everything's changing from going out there, putting your storage tanks in, even trying to get tanks right now is difficult. Getting parts for a lot of the wastewater treatment plants is difficult for some operators. It's just, right now the prices are changing so much, I just cannot give you a ballpark figure for anything.
All right, so again, I'm kind of curious. Is this just because of the supply chain of issues that have been affecting all of us, like my new gas stove that took a year to get delivered to me?
Basically, yes.
Okay. And then last question, I don't know who this is most appropriate for, but you have talked about before that TC2 does have at least the tools to require permit holders to do more. Have there been any existing wastewater discharge permits where you have like changed the standards and said, look, you're going to have to add phosphorus removal in order to achieve this?
I think the answer to that question is yes, but I don't know which ones. They do put a compliance period in those permits, and I have reviewed permits where they've added phosphorus. It may be as they're going from, say, their their interim stage may not have it, but their second stage or the third stage may have it. And it's depending on location. It also depends on what's coming down. So I have seen permits where they have increased both the quality, where they're lowering all their normal parameters, and have bad nutrients to them. I have reviewed those type of, see, I'm on the side reviewing the plants. I'm not permitting the plants anymore. I'm reviewing the plants. So that's the side I can answer. On the permitting side, you're going to have to ask Feroce and Peter more than that. Okay, we need to move on because we're running out of time unless we have another question real quick. We will have a question and answer section at the end, but if you have a quick question. Okay, Mr. Bohar? Oh, wait.
Cut in here.
You're going to cut in here?
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
he's going to cut in here.
Yeah, sorry, we're running out of time, and I want to make sure we've got enough time for folks to at least have a little bit of time to say what they came to say. So, you know, Froge was going to talk about alternatives to discharge. You know, I don't think there was necessarily anything that probably a lot of you have already heard about as far as the different TLAP type options, reuse options, and that sort of thing. But, you know, like I said, I want to get to the public comment portion of our meeting, but I will say that, you know, I think a lot of the staff, if not all of us, will be around to talk more even after we officially close the meeting. I did want to give Anthony just a minute or two just to say a few more things about the affected persons thing, and then we'll jump to the public participation. So. Go ahead.
Thanks, Greg. Again, Anthony Tate with the Environmental Law Division. I'll definitely try and keep this short. I know we were running a little short on time, and everything that I'm going to talk about here in the next minute or so, you can find discussed in our rules, which is in 30 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 55. But so let's talk about hearing requests, what our rules require. If you are interested in filing a hearing request and being named as an affected person in a SOA hearing for a water quality discharge permit, a hearing request must be in writing and timely. So when they say in writing, that also includes hearing requests that are filed online, which is how most of them are filed these days. Another requirement is that it is based on a requester's comments. This is kind of an important one. If you are interested in being named as an affected person and participating in a hearing, then it's important that you are filing comments from the time that the first notices go out on permit applications. Go ahead and get your comments filed, and those comments should be relevant and material to water quality for water quality permits. They want the hearing request to include a brief but specific written statement explaining in plain language the requester's location and distance relative to the proposed facility or activity that is subject of the application, and how and why the requestor believes he or she will be adversely affected by the proposed facility or activity. And this really goes to the crux of what is an affected person. And then you also need to obviously include the magic words, "I request a contested case hearing." So let me just talk for a second about this idea of what an affected person is. Basically, what we're talking about is someone who's going to be affected, someone who has a personal justiciable interest, right, and is affected by the application in a way that's not common to members of the general public. So we were talking earlier about distance consideration, locations consideration, and that is a big part of it. You know, obviously someone who is a mile or 2 miles away from a proposed discharge is going to be affected differently than someone who lives 40 or 50 miles away. Just a quick note about groups. Groups can be named as affected persons. They just need to make sure that they have a member who would otherwise be considered an affected person, and that the group's organization, they use language like is germane to the subject of the application. So environmental groups typically are covered when we look at that group analysis. I'm going to stop there if there are any other questions about this, although I'll follow up with one comment relating to something that Brian said. You know, the ED, when we evaluate these hearing requests, we definitely take some cues from the commission. So if the commission is considering affected persons who are 3 or 4 miles away, that's definitely going to affect the way that the ED is considering hearing requests in the future. Thanks.
Sorry, the mic wasn't working. I guess, again, thanks, Anthony, and we'll just go ahead and plow into the public comment portion of the meeting. I'm seeing roughly maybe a little over 20 folks who signed up to speak, and before we, that doesn't mean that all of them are here necessarily, but some pre-registered. But at this point, I would say we can give you up to 3 minutes of time to speak, again, to try to get us to the end point, roughly where we scheduled it. I will say at first that I noticed there were several state legislator staff who signed in attendance, and although they indicated that they didn't want to speak, you can certainly change your mind right now or later, and we can accommodate you right away. So definitely, raise your hand or let me know you did want to say something, and we'll give you the floor. So, but with that, I'm going to go first through the pre-registered list of folks, and then those who signed in today. And again, we'll hopefully get through everyone in a timely manner. And again, please limit your remarks to 3 minutes so everyone can participate. We'll bring a microphone to you, or you could also come up to the podium to speak there as well, your preference. So I believe the first one on my list here is Brian with Save Barton Creek. Surprise.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I also too note that my colleague Sydney Garcia, who we registered both of us, she was unable to make it, so I don't know if that means I get 6 minutes or not. If not, I'll just go ahead and do it in 3. You tell me.
If you can do it in 3, great. Yeah, you're right. There were 2 of you signed up, but if you can cram it into 3, that would be ideal.
Right. Okay, great. So first of all, I want to go ahead and thank you all for this information. This is incredibly helpful and informative. Also, too, kind of want to acknowledge up front that we know that everyone in this room is working on the same side. We may have differences of opinion on this, but we are all working to protect and preserve the environment of Texas, because it's the beauty of Texas is one of the things that makes the state great. And I know that we are all committed to preserving that beauty, especially in the pristine streams of the hill country. Just a kind of quick explanation of, say, Barton Creek Association and who we are. We were one of the organizations that helped file the Pristine Streams petition. We were founded in 1979. We're making us one of the oldest environmental citizens group in the state of Texas. We were founded to protect the Barton Creek watershed from development plans at the time that would have threatened the quality of water in the creek and in Barton Springs itself. Partly because we were successful then, we've been successful since then, and partly because of our efforts and other groups, there are currently no discharge permits on Barton Creek. That almost changed last year. TCQ received an application for a discharge permit on the Long Branch tributary of Barton Creek. If it had been approved, it would have been the first ever discharge permit on Barton Creek. There's several things I could say about that permit, but in the end, that permit didn't go through. However, it didn't go through because of what we said at the public meeting on the single public meeting that TCQ had on that permit application. It didn't go through because the applicant withdrew his application. And that was because he had signed a utility services agreement with the city of Dripping Springs, which obligated him to not seek a discharge permit of his own. The reason that this is relevant is that we, and when I say we, I don't mean just, say, Barton Creek Association, I mean our partners throughout the Hill Country. We're part of a coalition called No Dumping Sewage, which also too serves as the wastewater committee for the Texas Hill Country Conservation Network. All of our organizations have had to fight discharge permits on pristine streams in their local area over the past decade plus. In addition to the one that we have been, like working on in Long Branch, there was, of course, the one that you know on the Lone Hollow Creek tributary of the Sabinal River. There was one on the Honey Creek tributary of the Guadalupe River. There have been many others. And some of them we have not won. As was noted, TCQ has issued discharge permits on one of the pristine streams that's under consideration here, Onion Creek. In 2008, TCQ issued a discharge permit for Belterra subdivision, aka Hayes County WCID 1, and in 2019, a discharge permit for the city of Dripping Springs. What we have learned from this is that we're going to keep seeing more discharge permits applied for on these pristine streams precisely because the hill country is such a beautiful area that is attracting so many people. Its population has been growing and it will continue to grow. That's why we're seeing these, this is not really a problem that existed that much, like 10 or 20 years ago. We are seeing these discharge permits on these pristine streams precisely because of population pressure. And that's why this is like a new problem that we really must address. I'm not going to go into Liberty Hill, there are other people that are going to talk about Liberty Hill, but Liberty Hill is really like the poster case in the entire state of Texas for how bad this can get and how bad sewage pollution can get from the discharge of treated wastewater into a pristine stream. A stream that, mind you, would still be protected if this rule were passed because the South San Gabriel River qualifies as a pristine stream for its full length. That's why we were a little concerned that when like Liberty Hill's permit is currently up for renewal, it previously had a total phosphorus limit of 0.5. We've seen nonstop algae in the South San Gabriel ever since Liberty Hill got that permit in 2016. TCQ issued a draft permit for renewing Liberty Hill's permit earlier this year with a total phosphorus limit of 0.15. I'll be honest, that was why I was asking the question, how did TCQ arrive at 0.15 as being sufficiently protective to protect streams, pristine streams from phosphorus? And as a follow-up to that, does TCQ have any real-life experience of plants discharging at that limit so that you actually know that 0.15 could protect streams? Based on our own experiences and those of our partner groups, SBCA has drawn the following conclusions about TCQ's rules and standards for wastewater discharge permits. It appears that the Commission, 1, will not reject any discharge permit application on any stream, no matter how pristine it might be. 2, will issue a draft discharge permit for any application received. 3, will likely approve any permit once drafted. And 4, will not correct or will do little to correct problems in any permit once issued. Other individuals are going to talk about why pristine streams deserve this protection, extra protection. The primary point that SBCA wants to make here is simply this. TCQ's existing rules are not protecting pristine streams. Less than 1% of all classified stream segments in Texas can still be called truly pristine. If the Commission does not want this to drop to 0%, it must adopt a new policy to protect these streams while it still has the opportunity to do so.
Thank you very much. And since you said Sydney wasn't giving her comments right, next up I have Wes Pitts. Is Wes Pitts here? All right, Daniel Wheelis.
Thank you. I represent landowners in the Hill Country. And they are the primary stewards. Is it working? Okay. They are, in fact, the primary stewards for the Hill Country and its biology, its ecology, its species protection. This is primarily a landowner effort. The current practice, bottom line, is that in issuing a discharge permit in the Texas Hill Country, you are using, the state is authorizing applicants to use the riverfront of these private landowners as part of the treatment process, because it is their land that has the algae growing on it, which is consuming the last of the phosphorus that should have never been put in the stream in the first place. And so their riverfront ends up getting fouled with algae to the point where you don't want to swim in it, and you don't want to fish in it, and you don't want to canoe in it. And so this riverfront in the Texas Hill Country is about $1,000 a foot. That's how much it's worth. That's what it's trading for today. And that's each side of the river. So we're talking about tremendous wealth and a tremendous investment of Texans to protect and preserve what we have in these remaining pristine streams. And the state of Texas is fouling them. And I believe that I think the evidence is clear that this needs to change. We've talked about today sort of what's going on now. I mean, y'all did a great job of explaining the status quo. And we understand the status quo. It's not any good anymore. It's just not. So with a little bit of effort, as one of the, I believe it was Steve, I believe, who said, you know, we can deny a permit. We have the authority to say no. And then they have to go back to the drawing board and figure out what they're going to do, which is 99% chance it's going to be a TLAP permit. So let's use this authority. Let's make this happen. If you tell builders and developers what the rules are, they will comply. They'll just do it, and I represent some of them. You tell them what the rules are, they will happily comply. So let's get this done.
Thank you. Next, I have Julie Louie.
Thank you. I'm Julie Louie. I'm with the Nueces River Authority. There was a little bit of talk earlier about the CRP program, so I have a couple of questions kind of woven into my statement. We have the honor of implementing the CRP program in the Nueces Basin, and you know, it's a very effective and helpful program in identifying areas where we have non-point source pollution and implementing TMDLs and addressing what I like to refer to as when the system drinks a soda versus when you have a discharge permit, and that would be more like the system having an IV line of sugar as far as the impacts on a river. And so there are two issues that we've seen with the CRP program, that we've identified by utilizing the CRP program. And that is the impacts from the 2 discharge permits on Hondo and Saco Creek. And those discharge permits take place below the monitoring stations on those 2 segments. And so the segment is still on paper declared pristine, but in reality, below that discharge permit, there is significant degradation, and that is picked up in the next monitoring station, which is in a lower section. And so my first question is with regards to the use of the CRP data in digging deeper and understanding the profile, the nutrient profile of these pristine streams. And I wonder if it would be possible to bolster that program to dig deeper and really understand the complete profile of nutrient profile of these streams. That's to you, Peter, sir.
Okay, I'll be quick here. So, so dig deeper. I guess one part of your question, or one part of your statement, was that there's a difference in that we're not using the CRP. Now, when I said we're not using the CRP data for nutrient screening, that's for nutrient screening for wastewater permits, but there's a whole different division that uses that information to determine compliance with standards and that sort of thing.
So you're not using it to develop the permit threshold, right?
Right, that's because we already presume the background concentrations to be low, very low.
Would it be helpful to know the exact background concentrations? And if so, could the CRP program fill that void by, and I understand there's some lab limitations, but I also know that in some places we've been able to do that testing to identify the full profile in some locations of the headwater streams of the Nueces.
What would be really handy is to have that sort of information paired with any kind of algal monitoring, like algal surveys, and sort of try to pair up. Okay, it's increasing by X amount, and this is what we're seeing as a result. That would be really useful.
So we have some of that data from the discharge into Seco and Hondo Creek. And this is the question I was going to ask you earlier, was that what monitoring is being done on those permits to determine the impact on the stream below the discharge permit? Is the CRP data being utilized, or are y'all taking additional?
You're asking what monitoring of the discharge effect on the stream?
No. Correct. Below the discharge point from the permit that was granted.
I mean, I'm not aware of any specific focus like that. I mean, other than the data itself just speaking to what else may be going on upstream that could explain, certain trends or.
So when monitoring a permit, you don't monitor its impacts downstream?
In a wastewater permit?
Correct.
Yeah, there's no requirements to, I mean, we have had permits occasionally over the years that, we might require them before they discharge to monitor a stream, but I'm not aware of any that monitor post-discharge. I could be wrong, but we might have to dig deeper on that.
Okay. And as far as the use of the CRP data, you mentioned earlier that it's the fact that it's undetectable, so the current thresholds are not meeting the requirements to set the standard for the permit. Is that correct?
Well, what I was trying to say is that the number that might be recorded in the SWCMIS database might show a higher number than what is really in that water body because of just the way that the data is recorded and put in there. So, and with the threshold limits being lower than, with the nutrients being lower than the detection limits, and the that's the labs are capable of achieving, that might be recorded as whatever that detection limit is, when actually the levels are lower than that.
And is there a mechanism to develop an in-depth profile that captures the actual phosphorus limit? Because I understand there is additional testing that can be done to determine, even though it says below detectable limit, you can actually do a more in-depth test to understand where below that detectable limit the phosphorus levels are in a stream.
Yeah, it would just require different lab techniques to be able to achieve that level of detection.
And could those lab techniques, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to articulate this as clearly as possible. Could those lab techniques be incorporated into, say, a CRP program on these pristine streams to help us understand the nutrient profile of the streams?
I think that would be up to the various river authorities and the groups that are contributing this data to go down to those levels to report that to us.
And could it be utilized in the permitting process?
It could be, but again, that data, it's already understood that those detection levels are low, and so if we know it's 0.02 or 0.002, we're still we're not working with numeric criteria on these streams, and so that level of accuracy when it comes to determining permit limits through this narrative criteria, it doesn't really help in that regard.
So it would not be used to help refine the permit level?
Not with the narrative criteria that we currently review our permits under.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Thanks. Thank you. Robin Gary?
Hi, I'm Robin Gary with the Watershed Association, located in a Pristine Streams watershed just off of Cypress Creek near Wimberley. And I just want to say thank you guys so much for being here and putting this together and putting a focus on listening. Because I think the folks in the room have a massive amount to contribute to the process, to the permitting process, the compliance, and the alternatives for discharge. And I feel like this is a good beginning to the discussion, and keeping that door open so that we can all benefit for it would be really useful. I have to say, from my side of the table, a lot of times it feels like the applicant gets to work with you all a lot more than we get to work with you all. And I think this is the beginning of us getting a chance to influence how the permitting process can work for Texans to protect our asset. I think it has been very eloquently stated that the riparian areas are assets. They're very valuable parts of Texas, not only for landowners, but for economies, for our ecology, for our environment, and for the reason why we live here today. So I think that I just want to take my little piece here to say thank you for doing that. This is really important, and it's important for all of us to weigh in on the process. We really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Robin. Steve Mendoza?
Okay, is it on? Okay, first of all, I want to say thank you for having this meeting, because it brings a lot of different variables together to try to form a solution. My main concern and reason that I'm here is I actually grew up inner tubing on Barton Creek, from Lost Creek to the 360 bridge and 360 down to Barton Springs back in the 70s. One thing we did not do is get near the water after a rain. You had a lot of organic material. I mean, there was a lot of farmland, a lot of pasture land. The E. coli went through the roof. There were algae blooms. There were no plants. So there are a lot of other parameters that are adding to this problem than just the wastewater treatment plants. I mean, I'm an environmental engineer, and we were taught the solution to pollution is dilution. But you have to take all the factors that are causing the pollution into account. And discharge from a permit is just one. You have all the organic material. Every living thing consumes phosphorus and nitrogen. And as it gets rid of waste material, it's discharging that. So we're talking about animals, we're talking about plants, we're talking about people fertilizing their yards. In one position, I actually tried to research the pollution of Lake Granbury. We did dye studies. We found out it wasn't coming from the wastewater treatment plants, it was coming from the leaking septic tanks. So I guess my point is, there are a lot of different variables that impact water quality of these pristine streams. And while the wastewater treatment plant is one, I think a broader approach needs to be used to identify where all of this pollution is coming from. And it's not an easy problem. But thank you for this meeting, and thank you for trying.
Thank you. Next, have Ruthie Russell.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ruthie Russell, and I'm on the boards of the Devils River Conservancy and the Llano River Watershed Alliance. And I'm a landowner that is blessed to have property on some of these pristine streams. And I know I'm going to repeat a lot of what everyone is saying, and I know we're all on the same page, and we're passionate about preserving streams. And thank you for listening to us. And so I'll just go ahead with what I wrote before I heard what everyone said. We're here today to ask TCEQ to recognize the proven science behind why we have the few remaining classified pristine stream segments in Texas. The science is that we have come up with, and the science that is proven, is 0.009 milligrams per liter of water, which apparently none of our treatment plants to date can get down to that. And the average of our native pristine streams, the average phosphorus, is 0.003 to 0.005. So we have not been able to reach that. And these streams are so sensitive, any added phosphorus can add algae blooms. And I know from a lot of different sources, like you say, but we might as well fix what we can fix. We may not be able to fix certain flooding or issues like that, but do what you can do, right? These are treasured and rare gifts to our state. Rivers wrought with algae blooms and dead fish will not attract tourists or developers. In 2019, Uvalde County took in over $96 million in direct tourist spending. TCEQ must protect these streams from degradation, and in doing so, TCEQ will protect our economy, environment, wetlands, and wildlife, as well as the often ignored downstream landowner rights, landowners who have enjoyed and treasured for generations their pristine streams. I'm a rancher, obviously landowner, and support landowner rights, but it is unethical to degrade the land and the value of a neighbor's property, and in this case, all the downriver landowners, multiple landowners. Both the drought and increase in Texas population density have highlighted the importance of responsible stewardship. Think how simple, why don't we just have no discharge? I know that's possible, but that's my opinion. So what does stewardship mean? What obligations does stewardship require? Several. Stewardship means attention to and reverence for the purity of spring-fed creeks that God has given us. Stewardship means attention to what our forefathers asked us to do, to preserve these creeks for future generations. Our failures in the past do not excuse our failure in the present to preserve the few remaining pristine creeks of Texas. It's time to act. These iconic rivers, rich in our Texas history, deserve protection. Just a couple more sentences.
Can you just put the mic closer up?
Oh, I'm so sorry. It is a travesty that I talk so loud, I didn't think I needed a mic. It is a travesty that so few pristine streams remain in our huge, sprawling state. It is in your power to save them with a ruling to stop wastewater discharge and give the choices of proper septic systems, that's not just TLAP, proper septic systems or TLAP, a cheaper, healthier alternative to water treatments. And by the way, just from everything y'all have described today, these treatments look highly complex and very expensive compared to TLAP. So anyway, I'm just kind of begging you all to use your consciences and not be responsible for losing these precious gifts, these pristine streams in Texas. And we are going to have to make a change. Y'all are trying. Y'all have done all kinds of things, but it's not enough. We obviously have to change parameters of treatment. Thank you.
Thank you. Pamela Lienhard or Lienhard? Jeff Braun.
I surrender my time.
Okay, thank you. Connie Blanco?
City of Blanco. She's from the city of Blanco.
Thank you.
Oh,
It's,
did I-
it's Connie Barron. I'm Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Blanco, but thank you.
Sorry.
I feel happy. You think that way.
That's what it says. That's what it says here. I'm sorry.
I do want to not just say thanks to you, but I have to thank Mr. Vahora. This is the first time I've seen him in person, but the City of Blanco is working very hard and is struggling to transition from a discharge philosophy or pattern or answer, if it's not an answer, to a TLAP. So we're working on a permit now to transition, and it's not easy. We built a discharge-only plant. Who knew? And then we didn't decide, we realized, we understood, because when that permit came forward to expand, we were threatened with a contested case. And so we had a choice of either spending the money we have, and in a little community like Blanco, let me tell you folks, we don't have a lot of money. So we could either spend that money fighting and for something that we realized was the wrong thing to fight for. Why would we fight to do something that's going to hurt our river? So instead, we thought we'd better use that money to try to upgrade our plant, make some changes, do what we have to do to transition to a TLAP. We're not there yet. We're working on it, and it's going to take a while. But what concerns me is we are downstream. We're downriver from our town. Where we would have discharged, we're already out. So, like, whatever. The park will stay good. The upriver through town, what people will see will be fine, and it's just those folks down there. One, we knew it wasn't the right thing to do. It just wasn't for our neighbors. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. But why I'm here is because I'm saying to you, what will protect us if somebody upriver decides that they're going to discharge into the river? Because if they discharge up the river, I'll tell you, we don't have the money to fight. We couldn't fight our neighbors. We're not going to be able to fight somebody else who comes upriver. So we won't have the money to fight it. And not only will it then destroy just the beauty of the river, but one of our primary economic drivers, which is Blanco State Park. Blanco State Park is the only state park that exists totally inside city limits. We are so fortunate to have it, and it is a huge economic driver for us. If that river goes bad, Blanco loses a huge amount of sales revenue, sales taxes. It's the only thing that's keeping us alive and helping us to make the changes. That and lots of grants and loans to try to do the changes we have to do to get our treatment plant, our wastewater treatment plant, and our soon-to-be, hopefully, new up-and-running water treatment plant. The Blanco River is also our source of water. So we're not only talking about upstream, but our intake valve for our water treatment plant is upstream. If that gets clogged, I don't know what happens. I'm not an engineer, but all I know is if we get a horrible algae bloom and all of that settles down where our intake valve is for our water, I don't know what that means to our water treatment plant. I don't like to think about that. So I'm asking, as an elected official in a small community, trying to do everything we can do to do the right thing to protect our river, to have you protect us by really, I know it didn't work too well for drug control, but let's go back to Nancy Reagan and just say no.
Thank you. Scott Norman.
Thank you very much. My name is Scott Norman. I'm the Executive Director of the Texas Association of Builders. I want to thank TCQ, like a lot of the folks here today have said, for having us and allowing us to be a part of this process. We've met with several of the groups that were involved with the rules petition change, and look forward to continuing to working and continuing that dialogue. I will say, as several staff with TCQ said, there is a process, and it sounds like, even from some of the advocates in here, that process has worked over the years. The mayor talked about they were going through a permit renewal, and it made the city of Blanco decide to change how they were going to approach it, and it sounds like there's been successful challenges that have stopped permits on Barton Creek and other places. That being said, science evolves. We understand that. We understand technology evolves. There was a presentation about the technology that has evolved over the years with water treatment and sewer treatment plants, and that's something that obviously factors into that. We do feel very strongly that a flat-out prohibition on discharge permits is not something that TCQ currently has the authority to do under the statutory framework, and is a question that needs to be decided by the legislature. That being said, the TCQ can look at its processes, and I think was talking about looking at its phosphorus limits and those sorts of things. One of the things that jumped out to me today when seeing the presentation was the number of permitted discharge plants, mainly municipal, in these pristine streams that don't have any limits at all today. And I don't know if that's a factor of not being a protest during their renewal processes, or obviously a lot of those historic, we talked about it, Doctor, the other day, a lot of these are 50, 60-year-old water plants or more from some of the cities in the hill country. I think that's something that the agency and obviously those involved are probably going to look at going forward. And so when we go from no limits to talking about zero limits without trying to get some allowed technology and some lower limits to exist where technologically feasible and financially feasible. And the last thing I'm going to end, yes, this is a beautiful part of the state. Yes, Wheelus, it's a very expensive part of the state, but our entire state is growing and people are moving here. And they're going to move to the hill country, and they're moving all over. And there's a tough balance. Trying to provide affordably priced housing is the biggest challenge our members face across the state as people move in. Yes, it's, you know, you see a lot of the affluent homes, and certainly you were talking about supply chain challenges and everything else. But trying to get that product on the ground that is the most affordable is the biggest challenge. And by, you know, completely eliminating one type of treatment in this certain area of the state, everything has to go to land application. Okay. That makes it where dense, affordable housing may be impossible in certain areas of the state, and that's not fair. So there's a balance there, and there's going to be a balance as we go forward. And so I just want to remind everyone of that. We look forward to remaining as an association engaged in the process and working with the folks in this room and the agency, and I want to thank you all again for having us.
Thank you. Next, I believe we have Stephanie Morris. I think are you ready to present? Or the system is cooperating at least, hopefully.
He's going to hit it. There you go.
Hi. Oh, gosh. None of us likes hearing our own voice, right? I'm Stephanie Ryder Morris, and I'm hoping to get some pictures up on that screen because the pictures speak a lot louder than words when it comes to trying to show what it's like to live. Now, although you can't feel it, you can't smell it, you still may not understand what are in the pictures, even if you see them, but they do a better job than I do about describing what it's like to live, what the horror of what it's been like to live below a wastewater discharge, the strictest discharge permit in the entire state of Texas for the last 9 years. Do I need to just read? Thank you for your time and efforts to solve this problem. I do believe that everyone has the best of intentions and means well, including developers need to be and are, many of them are choosing to be to help us solve these problems because reuse and 210 permits and their expertise when it comes to timing of plans and when to get purple pipe in the ground, when to have forethought when they're making their plans about getting purple pipe into the ground when they already have it open. So it's a lot cheaper to do these things on the front end, and we need those developers to be our partners in this. And many of them are. But at the same time, many of us are dealing with cities who have these discharge permits who also they're beholden to their constituents, right? They have to justify to them how they're spending their money. And so they do need the state to tell them to have discharge permits that will be protective of these streams. And it's hard for them to justify to their constituents not as much increased cost as it used to be, but yes, increased cost that comes along with putting in responsible systems. we're still not, no pictures. Dr. Ryan King of Baylor University and with colleagues at A&M back in 2008. So we've known this. We've had the data to tell us what the threshold for nuisance phosphorus, the threshold for total phosphorus that causes nuisance algal blooms back in 2008, and that was 20 micrograms per liter. There are other studies that indicate it's even less than that, but we would need, the strictest permit in the state is approved to discharge 150 micrograms per liter, and it's 10 times what the phosphorus level that would be protective would be, even that strictest permit. For 4 months this past spring, the city of Liberty Hill was playing around with their MBR, you know, trying to improve things, to see what they could do, actually cleaning the riverbed, which it's taken 9 years and tens of thousands of dollars, many years of my life as a private property owner trying to have access to my own backyard to do that. But still, they cleaned up the river. They were improving what they were discharging. They were discharging it at less than 70 micrograms per liter for 4 months with a cleaned up riverbed, and it immediately grew back, I mean, rampant within a day or two. Like, it just, and they are out there power washing the outfall every single week, and it's immediately growing back. The volumes of effluent that are being discharged into that river is not equivalent. It's already at 1.6 million gallons a day. It's about 90% of that river flow. And we're going to increase that to 4 million gallons a day without even decreasing the phosphorus limits, which there are technologies like the clearest technology. I don't know if y'all have seen Brave Blue World on Netflix. It talks about, so that's, I can't see it very well, but that's upstream of the wastewater, where we have to, the first year we were there in 2013, we got those types of conditions, he went away, in our backyard. And we got to enjoy it. We had just adopted our younger sons and life had been hard and we needed a healing place. And we got it. We got it for a few months. And then immediately that following year in 2014, conditions worsened and have progressively gotten worse. So instead of our healing place, we had a place that we have to protect our children from the degradation that's happening in our own backyard. But so that's upstream of the plant. That's what this river looks like. Still, even with low flow in many areas upstream of the wastewater treatment plant. Next. Go ahead. Oh. This is not bad water. These are beneficial nutrients in the wrong place at the wrong time, effects that our family has lived with for over 8 years. So this is 200 yards upstream of the wastewater treatment plant. We have to get in our cars, load up the trailer, drive, park, haul kayaks to enjoy the same river that we used to enjoy in our own backyard. We drive to get away from the site and stench. We also have to ask other property owners to give us access to the river that we own the riverbed of, upstream. But we drive to get access to that river. Our slice of God's creation, which we try to be good stewards of. So is that okay. The top picture is the South San Gabriel River, clean and clear, 100 yards upstream of the outfall. Note the red star at the upper right marking the outfall. The middle picture, where clean water turns green after effluent runs down 60 feet of riverbank. Bottom pick, stinky, unusable acre of our backyard under the river. In the shade of trees is our second floor barn dominium overlooking the river, 70 feet away. We see this all day and smell all day, every day, out our bedroom and living room windows. Our bees will not drink from it. I'm a beekeeper. They won't drink from this water anymore. They did in 2013. It sounds silly, but it was like watching hummingbirds come to land on the river's edge or the rocks to drink. And I have tens of thousands of bees, and they won't drink from it anymore.
And I'm sorry,
next.
we're gonna have to give you just one more minute
Can you
here.
just go through the next slide? Let's see. So that, I don't know, I'm hoping there's some way for all of the TCEQ staff here, because I think y'all were preaching to the choir, even to the folks that might seem like you're on opposite sides. I know the wastewater guys who are doing the dirty jobs, They have pride in their work, and most people won't do the work that they do, and they work their asses off, and I'm grateful for them. They want to be part of the solution. So do our developers. We need TCQ to get on board because it's a private property owner. I cannot in civil court, cities have sovereign immunity. I can't even sue for the obvious degradation of my own property under the Fifth Amendment. It's a taking. They are discharging wastewater on my property, and there's nothing we can do about it, and I can't sell my property. We can't sue them in civil court. We need the state TCQ to do your jobs and require it to get cleaned up. Please. There are technologies that can do this. Brave Blue World, watch it. Clear as technology. They are harvesting algae. They have tubes, clear tubes that harvest algae without creating the alum sludge that then is a product that they can make tennis shoe soles and all kinds of other things. There are solutions that can get that phosphorus down to an average. The usual function is at 10 micrograms a day, 10 to 20 micrograms.
Thank you. We're going to have to
Thank you.
appreciate it. Next, I have David Tuckfield.
My name is David Tuckfield. I'm special counsel for the city of Dripping Springs, but I'm not making a presentation on behalf of Dripping Springs. So it's my own comments, not the city of Dripping Springs. But what I really want to communicate is that there are alternatives to a blanket prohibition. And the city actually has applied and obtained a discharge permit, but as Froge pointed out, it's discharge in name only. We have settlement agreements with people in this room that I thought are very innovative and forward-thinking. So it's a discharge permit, but it's not, because under the agreements, there's no way the city will ever discharge. Or if it does, it gets punished for it. And so there are alternatives, and a blanket prohibition on discharge would eliminate that alternative. And that's important because, for example, the city is stuck in litigation on this discharge permit. They've applied for an expansion of their TLAP permit. Some of the same people who got us caught up in the litigation on the discharge permit are also opposing the TLAP permit. So, you know, you can say what you want about it. In my view, in my personal view, it's an attempt to stop development. They're using the wastewater program as a development tool, and it shouldn't be used that way. Okay, so we're all in agreement. You got to protect the streams, but a blanket prohibition isn't going to do that. You also need to remember that the state has a regionalization policy codified by statute, and you can't consider this kind of program without thinking about that regionalization policy. City of Dripping Springs, for example, wanted this discharge permit so they could take off and not have multiple package plants throughout the city. Because of the delays, we're getting more and more package plants. And until the city can get that discharge permit, again, discharge in name only, up and running, those package plants are going to proliferate. And it's a problem. And so you got to consider the regionalization policy. And that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Trey Larry?
Thank you. Trey Larry with Allen Boone Humphreys Robinson. Had the pleasure of negotiating some of those deals with David to provide for effective sewer solutions. I think so much of this is balancing, and that's why I was so appreciative of the presentation that showed all the many factors that you look at and in their context and their specific situation. And I think there is a balancing here of science and policy. And part of that balance includes many factors other than the factors talked about today. They're very real economic factors. They're very real factors affecting the growth of Texas and where people are able to live and where people are able to afford to live. And that is why I'm concerned about a flat prohibition, that does not allow the TCEQ to make evaluations and judgments and balancing. And the policymakers, the Texas legislature, have said they're not interested in that either. Not just the bill from this last session, which was notable as the only time a bill got to the floor of a chamber on this subject, but this has been before the legislature. 1 bill in 2007, 4 bills in 2009, 2 bills in 2011, 3 bills in 2017, 2 bills in 2019, 2 bills in 2021. And the legislature has not wanted in any of those bills to take an approach of a prohibition, which I think is the problem that a lot of us have with the petition and the concept, is we do want to work towards the same outcomes. Part of the balancing too, when I look at this map, I see a tale of two cities. And I see beautiful hill country land and areas of the state to the south and the west that are not touched by development. And then I see a major metropolitan area, the city of Austin, with some of these segments directly south and west and north. And people do move to Austin because it's beautiful, but they also move here because that's where their job is, or that's where they're able to work. And we do have a Texas miracle, and it is ongoing, and people are coming here right and left and constantly, and it's not going to stop. And then at the same time, we decry that they don't have a place to live, or they don't have an affordable place to live. If we make it more difficult or impossible to have centralized sewer systems in large metropolitan areas, we will increase the cost of housing, and it will continue to increase and increase and increase. And septic systems aren't the answer in a metropolitan region. And not every city can be Blanco where there aren't dense, more affordable houses. Those have to be in some parts of the state. And
that's time.
I think just treating this whole area monolithically is not the right answer.
Thank you. David Price.
Hi, my name is David Price, and I'm kind of in an odd position in that I see all sides. My company, I'm a land developer, but I'm also the president of the Texas River Recreation Association. I'm also the technical director for the Texas On-Site Wastewater Association, and have been asked to be the technical director for the National On-Site Wastewater Recycling Association. I grew up here in Austin. My mother was from Blanco, so I spent a lot of time in the Blanco River as a kid. I swam in Barton Creek as a kid, and it wasn't until after Lost Creek was developed in the late 70s that Barton Creek became an issue. There's a lot of data around what happened on the Chesapeake Bay, if y'all are familiar with that. It was cleaned up, actually very substantially. Our group, oddly enough, is not against builders. We are totally not against builders. I actually built half of the Belterre subdivision. I was the wastewater system. The one across the street I did half of. I just finished an industrial permit, design build for a large brewery in Fredericksburg. The one common thing about all these systems, they're all zero discharge. And I gave the commissioners for TCEQ a few months ago an economic analysis that builders might be interested in. It's very detailed. I know the numbers. I've had my own company for 31 years. I've done projects in excess of $100 million. So I know the numbers. I also know that it's important to builders. It's called time to market on their lots. If they go TLAP, you can get the support of the very groups in here. You can get your lots to market probably a year faster. We can talk about cost of things. The area that's required for a TLAP is about 8% of the total square footage of a house. I'm not talking about the lot, I'm talking about the house. Even under worst case scenario, Faraj will back this up, it's 0.1 gallons per square foot per day. All of that water can be used for beneficial use. The Austin paper just on Monday talked about in Williamson County wells that are being drilled deeper. We keep using potable water for landscape, For instance, City of Fredericksburg uses almost all of their water, and they have a discharge permit, for beneficial reuse on their golf course and also for Boot Ranch, which is a very large, very high-end, $2 million plus homes just north of the city. So for us to say this is not possible is frankly a bunch of malarkey. Okay, the pristine streams that we have, we talk about people moving here. They're not moving here to make it look like Houston. They're moving here because of the very things we're trying to protect. They're not going to move here and basically destroy the very things that they moved here for. Why take all this beauty in the state, frankly, and say, well, we're going to degrade this beauty at the expense of the almighty dollar? People are willing to pay for this. It adds an insignificant cost to do a TLAP. And I'll be happy to furnish TAB with this study, and it's based on real world numbers. I've worked on permits for years and years, and the state, they do a fantastic job, but they, I'm glad to hear that y'all are directing them toward TLAP, but the fact of the matter is it takes much lost or contested case hearing. City of Dripping Springs has
that's
spent
time.
years on this. The technology's there, and we need to support things like this.
Thank you. Kenan Goldman.
Well, his was a pretty good lead-in to why I'm here. I was a 5th employee at TCEQ. Before I actually joined the Texas Water Pollution Control Board, I reviewed sewage treatment plans for the State Health Department for a few months. And let me tell you, 1964, we had real pollution. And it was everywhere. And there were 5 of us. We had the whole state of Texas to take care of. So I don't come to this from a standpoint of being anti-development. My dad was a builder. I understand that I don't come at it from the standpoint of that what the commissioners did 2-to-1, that's fine. If you don't want to put in a prohibition, okay. Put in something that's going to protect the water. As you know, as I explained to you, there is no technology that can meet what is in these pristine streams. Not today. It may happen some point in time, but it isn't there. I got after it. Well, first of all, the reason there isn't a whole lot of mess out on Northwest Austin is because the TCEQ permitted Anderson Mill subdivision. My client was Austin White Lime and the Robinson Ranch. I went to them and said, don't ever let that happen. And it was a family business, a partnership. We lost 18 to 16, I think. And so they didn't oppose Anderson Mill sewage treatment plant. 2 years after the sewage treatment plant was in operation, we had black and green algae on the best fishing pond in the whole state of Texas, and it was about 4 inches thick. There wasn't ever another sewage treatment plant permitted out there. I was with a law firm that represented developers, but every developer had to sign that they would not seek if they sought a discharge permit into a stream in Travis County, we could oppose them. And we did. We opposed every one of them. None of them got permitted. They all ultimately went to something like the gentleman just talked about. They sold their lots with green lots in the summertime, not brown ones, sold them for a heck of a lot of money. And 3 of the major developers came to me and said, thank God you have saved me, but not only saved me a lot of money, you made me a lot of money. So there's a way to do this, but you have to think about it, you have to work hard, and you have to really plan. And the biggest single thing that limits the entire growth in the old country is water.
That's time.
And you reusing what water we have in an efficient way and doing smart development is the way of the future until we get new technology.
Thank you. Margot Dinky Griffin.
Thank you. The science is clear. Phosphorus concentration drives degradation of low phosphorus, pristine streams, and we prepared an annotative bibliography citing 15 references published in 2002 to 2018. And the latest is at a level of phosphorus of 9 micrograms per liter, which is 0.009 milligrams per liter. Degradation begins. We look forward to continuing substantive discussions with TCQ and offer our support in working with you and all stakeholders to come up with working solutions to protect these few remaining pristine streams. But I want to remind everyone in this room that time is of the essence, and we, the public, are left with fighting one permit at a time with expenses for contested case hearing, and our opposition is also facing those expenses. So please, let's get together and work on a solution, and let's spend the money on something fun.
Thank you. Melody Braun.
Hi, my name is Melody Braun, and my husband and I own property on the Upper Sabinal River. And we're here today because we want to partner with TCEQ to help solve some of these problems. And I think we could all agree in this room, whether we're for prohibition of any discharge or against that, we can all agree that what happened to Stephanie should never happen again in Texas. Now, as Margot mentioned, she's provided a lot of you with documentation and research that proves that there is a negative effect to discharging effluent into our pristine waters. Because of this research, we know that this will definitely cause degradation and destroy our waters. And so now that we understand the damage that's caused, the question then becomes, what do we do to solve this problem? And I think everybody here wants to solve this problem. Currently, TCEQ has 2 alternatives to direct discharge. One is the TLAP and one is the 210 reuse. The fact that Texas is currently in a drought makes both of these permits much more appealing to the developers, as was mentioned. People who want to address wastewater in a very responsible manner, they need to know more about these 2 types of permits and how they can effectively use those. The TCEQ, the website, and the application process truly needs to be improved, because right now there's not clarity about these 2 permits. So developers immediately go to discharge. They aren't immediately looking at TLAP or 210 reuse, and there needs to be more education about the applications that are available in the process. Right now, I have seen presentations by engineers that are misquoting the requirements for these applications. I've talked to applicants who have been told misinformation by TCEQ staff members about these types of permits. There needs to be a lot of education that's going on. I think it would be very helpful if TCEQ developed a fact sheet and made that information about these permits, how they're used, what the process is, so that people can easily go and look and see what the requirements are. I think perhaps maybe having a comparison table that talks about the pros and the cons of the different types of applications, the timing that's involved, the cost that it's involved, the studies that are required, so that people can look and from the very beginning try to make a better analysis of what type of permit they should be applying for.
That's time.
Okay. I just want to say the fact that Texas is currently in a drought makes this even more compelling for people to look at the TLAP applications and the reuse application.
Thank you. Catherine Romans.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is Catherine Romans. I'm the executive director of the Hill Country Alliance. We're a nonprofit organization. We work across 17 counties of Central Texas, from downtown Austin down to San Antonio, all the way out to rural Edwards, Real, Kimball, and Mason counties. We focus on bringing folks together to find creative solutions to some of the challenges we're facing as a region as the result of incredible growth. A lot of what I wanted to say has already been said, so I'm going to just quickly summarize and kind of emphasize that we realize our region is going to continue to grow. People are moving here every day because of the incredible economy, the quality of life we enjoy, and the natural resources that we have in Central Texas. We're expecting the population of the Hill Country to double over the next 30 years, which means more wastewater, more drinking water wells, more impervious cover, more land fragmentation, and challenges around affordable housing, around infrastructure, around all the things that need to support that growth. Our concern is that too often our regulatory and oversight frameworks don't keep pace with the impacts that we're seeing increase daily from that development. We agree that the science feels clear. Nutrient additions to phosphorus-limited waters cause algal blooms that can destroy the ecological health of the receiving water body, and these really are the economic underpinnings of the entire Hill Country. What we're asking for today from the TCEQ is something that is protective and predictable, that gives municipalities, landowners, summer camps, builders, and all the downstream interests the confidence to feel like the rules of the road are protecting the long-term economic and environmental health of our region's waters. We believe that today the TCEQ's practices are simply not protective, and they're leading to costly, drawn-out legal battles that are costing both the developers and the individual landowners. So if there's one thing at the Hill Country Alliance that we're really proud of, it's the ability to bring people together to find common interests and solutions. As has been said already, I think we all want to see the waters of Texas protected. Let's find a way to do that, to give clarity and predictability to all the interests that are at the table. So thank you all. We look forward to continued conversations.
Thank you. And I believe lastly, Ned Munoz.
Yeah, I'm with the Texas Association of Builders.
Oh, just one second, let me get you the microphone.
I was going to say I'm with the Texas Association of Builders. In the interest of time, I'll just echo what Trey Larry and Scott Norman said. But thank y'all for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, I should stay away. Haven't learned my lesson. So yeah, thank you everyone for your input. We appreciate it. Hopefully I didn't miss anyone, although I'm not hearing any objections. But appreciate your input. Like I said earlier, we're going to take it into consideration. We're going to evaluate it, think on it. At this moment in time, we don't have another one of these types of meetings scheduled, but you know, if we think the need is there for another one, we certainly will get the word out, and definitely would appreciate any input you have along those lines. So I know we went past 4:30 and appreciate everyone sticking around and hanging in there with us. And again, thanks for your input and participation. I think, unless I'm missing anything else, and I'm looking around the table up here, I think that's really all we had for now.
Greg, if any of us have follow-up questions or comments, how do we submit them? Who do we talk to?
Yeah, great question. That email address I mentioned earlier that's on your agenda, the WQ-streams@tcq.org, texas.gov. That's the stakeholder, dedicated stakeholder email inbox. So you can send emails directly to that related to, if you've got comments, questions, what have you. And, if anyone wants to, I can certainly offer myself as a contact as well. Well, I'm not in charge, but I'm in the know and involved and can be the point person. So if any of you need my contact information, I can be happy to give it to you after the meeting. But yeah, well. Could you send it out on that email? Or yeah, that's a good idea. I could send or broadcast the info to the folks that we do have registered for the group. So.
I think it's safe to say that a lot of us would appreciate having the contact information if you are in the spearhead of this.
Yeah, happy to be that person and clearinghouse and all that. Yeah, probably gonna regret what I'm agreeing to here, but no, I won't. I've got a lot of help here, so we'll share the load. So thanks again. We're gonna go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Appreciate you coming and hope you have a good rest of the day, and we'll be in touch. Yeah, don't have any specific milestones or timelines at this point, but kind of, as it says there, to be determined. Thank you.